Chapter 449. One day later, Xiao Jingwu returned to the bipolar mountain village with his men after dealing with everything in the Jihuo village. However, when he returned to the sect, he found something very strange. The disciples in the 4 realms of celestial being who stayed here didn't show up. They were specially left to guard the sect's treasure house. Now they didn't show up, which made Xiao Jingwu uneasy. He hurried to the treasure house with his men. When he opened the door of the treasure house, he was stunned instantly. As the leader of a second-class sect and a master in the late stage of Gang's spirit realm, Xiao Jingwu showed such an expression. He didn't even lose his composure when facing Zhu Huarong, who was fighting desperately. Because at this moment, almost half of the formation and inhibition in the treasure house had been destroyed. There were several corpses lying on the ground, which were the corpses of the disciples who stayed in the treasure house. However, the treasury was already empty. Such a huge treasury had actually been emptied. Xiao Jingwu felt as if there was a thunderbolt in his mind, which made him a little confused for a while. The elders and disciples behind him were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe what they saw. This instantly extinguished their joy of wiping out the Jihuo village. Crack, crack, crack. Xiao Jingwu clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Who is it? Who is it?" Although he wiped out the Jihuo village, Hao Yushan died, and he didn't get any resources from the Jihuo village. It could be said that although he won this battle, what he won was only the potential for development and the future. He didn't get too many substantial resources. Now, his property had been emptied by someone secretly. He couldn't even pay the monthly salary of his disciples. It was conceivable that there would be hostility within the sect for a period of time. This was not the point. The most important thing was that it might take him 10 or more years to accumulate so many resources again. This meant that the bipolar mountain village had regressed for more than 10 years. Now, his bipolar stronghold only had a large territory, but couldn't even take out a single bit of resources. If this matter was known by other sects, they would definitely have other thoughts. At that time, they would fight for territory and business. In the end, the bipolar mountain fort was actually not as powerful as before they destroyed the extreme fire manor. Xiao Jingwu was filled with hatred and anger, but he didn't even know who he should hate. He could only rage helplessly. Investigate. Go and investigate. We must find out who did it. The culprits of this matter, Ling Shiqi and the others, had already gathered in Shining City. They were gathered in a dilapidated house. There were a total of 23 mustard seed bags on the table in the middle, which contained all kinds of resources from the extreme fire manor and the bipolar stronghold. Everyone's breathing was a little hurried and heavy. Anyone who saw so many resources would be moved. From time to time, everyone would look at one person, and that was Ling Shiqi. This time, not only did they successfully complete the mission, but they also obtained countless resources and wealth. And all of this was brought to them by Ling Shiqi. At the beginning of the mission, Ling Shiqi used the conflict between Zhu Lin and Wan Xiaoyuan to incite a war between the two sides. Then, he killed the experts of both sides. Then, he persuaded Xiao Jingwu to attack the extreme fire manor. He really displayed his scheming and strength to the fullest. More than 90% of the people present were sincerely convinced by him. So before Ling Shiqi said anything, they wouldn't rashly touch these resources. Ling Shiqi casually weighed the mustard seed bags. Among all the resources he had seen, this was the most abundant one except for the Gu God sect. He was also very tempted. These resources have been evenly distributed. There are a total of 23 mustard seed bags, one for each of you. However, everyone's needs may be different, so you can exchange with each other later. While speaking, Ling Shiqi casually picked up one of the mustard seed bags and stood to the side. The others looked at each other with a bit of astonishment in their eyes. They originally thought that Ling Shiqi would definitely monopolize the majority. After all, Ling Shiqi played a huge role and they were all mentally prepared. But Ling Shiqi was willing to share the resources with everyone equally. This was all the wealth of a half-second-rate sect, and he was actually willing to give up most of it. Unconsciously, everyone felt some respect for him in their hearts. In the end, they didn't have much to do with Ling Shiqi. After this mission, some of them would be eliminated and returned to their own provinces. Even if Dongfang Qi, Di Chuan, and the others could pass the test, they would disperse after the elite meeting. It was very likely that they would never see each other again in this life. So they felt that Ling Shiqi didn't need to rope them in now. Ling Shiqi was willing to share so many resources with them. It was completely righteous of him. Di Chuan was the first to cup his hands and say, "Brother Liu, your strength and ability were stronger than mine before, but to be honest, I was still a little unconvinced. But now, I, Di Chuan, am truly convinced by Brother Liu. If you need me in the future, just let me know." Ling Shiqi chuckled and said, "Brother Di, you're too polite." After that, he picked up a mustard seed bag from the table and personally handed it to Di Chuan. After that, everyone said a few words before taking the mustard seed bag. It was unknown how many of these people were sincere and how many of them were faking it, but at this moment, Ling Shiqi's reputation was unprecedented. Among everyone, only Delta Origi could roughly guess Ling Shiqi's thoughts. Delta Origi could be said to know Ling Shiqi very well. He was definitely a guy who wouldn't act without benefits. How could he give away wealth so easily? She guessed that the reason why Ling Shiqi did this was actually to establish good karma. Some of the reasons might be because of the Blood Seed project, because she also understood that if the Blood Garment Pavilion wanted to make a comeback in the future, it would inevitably attract the attention of countless sections. When that time came, the people present might also be in high positions and could more or less provide some help. Even if they couldn't help, with this favor, they wouldn't hit them when they were down. Giving these people 10% of the benefits before they really rose up was far more useful than giving them 100% of the benefits after they became famous. Ling Shiqi secretly glanced at Delta Origi, knowing that she must be guessing his thoughts. However, Delta Origi was only half right. In addition, Ling Shiqi intended to completely convince these people to trust him and prepare for the next mission. Although in the past, the elite meeting only had one round of test, this time was completely different. Moreover, Ling Shiqi also had a hunch that there might be follow-up missions this time. Chapter 450. The news that Jiwashan village, a second-rate sect, was destroyed soon became the most explosive topic in the whole Donglin County. In Donglin County, there was almost no sect being destroyed in the past few decades. However, after Feng Sha Mo came to Donglin County, there seemed to be a strange prelude. 2 third-rate sects, including Golden Wing Academy, were destroyed one after another. Later, the collapse of the Phantom Spirit secret land led to the tragic death of many spiritual Pulse Realm cultivators. Donglin County was in turmoil, and several third-rate forces disappeared from the world. However, until now, there had never been a case of a second-rate sect being annihilated. Jiwashan village became the first second-rate sect to be destroyed in Donglin County in decades. The Bipolar Mountain Village, which destroyed Jiwashan village, did not act in a high-profile manner after the event. Instead, they kept a low profile, which was very strange. When the news reached the ears of Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha, the other 2 leaders of the task, they were both shocked. The task of the 2 men was to destroy the Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Gang, respectively, and they also gained something. However, the biggest problem in front of them was how to deal with the Masters of Gang's Spirit Realm. And how to ensure that all the low-level disciples were killed. Both Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha could completely crush the disciples of Gang's Spirit Realm and Gang's Spirit Realm in the Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Gang. However, it was difficult for them to kill the Masters of Gang's Spirit Realm. Even if they joined hands to kill the masters of Gang's spirit realm, they could win, but it was almost impossible to kill them. Moreover, every second-rate sect had a large number of low-level disciples. Those people were not pigs. They would not stand there and be killed. Some of them would definitely run away. If these two problems could not be solved, they would never be able to complete the task. When they were all badly battered by this matter, the news that Bipolar Mountain Village attacked Jawashan Village came. When they heard this, their first thought was that it was so fast. Ling Shiqi and others completed the task too fast. It had only been more than a month. That was to say, it only took him half of the time to destroy Jawashan Village. At the same time, Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha also guessed that Ling Shiqi had cleverly borrowed the power of the Bipolar Mountain stronghold to complete the mission. Wu Diao clicked his tongue and exclaimed, "Wonderful, wonderful. What a good plan to kill with a borrowed knife, driving the tiger to swallow the wolf. I really want to know how Lu Xingji did it." The person next to him said, "Brother Wu, is that Lu Xingji breaking the rules by borrowing the power of the Bipolar Mountain stronghold? Now it seems that although he has completed the mission, it doesn't necessarily count." "No." Wu Diao shook his head and said, "The rules don't allow us to use the forces behind us, and Lu Xingji came all the way from the Western Desolate Province. It's impossible for him to have anything to do with the bipolar stronghold. Moreover, they only said that we can't rely on our own backgrounds, but they didn't say that we can't work together. Lu Xingji's actions gave me an idea. Go and call everyone over. I have something important to discuss with them." "Okay, Brother Wu." On the other side, Zhuge Puha did the same thing. And in the governor's mansion of Donglin Town, Lei Mayan and Eunuch Gao also got the information about this matter. At this moment, there was a third person in the hall of the governor's mansion. This person was the steward of the Wind Towers branch in Donglin Town, shopkeeper Jing. In fact, the information Lei Mayan and Eunuch Gao got was not only about the destruction of the extreme volcano village, but also described in detail how Ling Shiqi started from the conflict between Zhu Lin and Wan Xiaoyuan, and gradually expanded the grudge between the two sides. In the end, it led the Bipolar Mountain stronghold to attack the extreme volcano village with all their strength. Even Ling Shiqi's direct killing of Ji Wen was clearly recorded. The information described in this information was 90% the same as what Ling Shiqi had experienced. The only thing not recorded in the information was Zhu Huarong's fake death and Ling Shiqi's secret acquisition of the red gold earth dragon flame. From this, it could be seen that the Wind Tower's ability to gather information was appalling. Lei Mayan put down the information, sighed softly, and said, he was able to kill the early stage of the Gang's spirit realm at the middle stage of the spirit aperture realm, and he destroyed the extreme volcano village in just over a month. This Lu Xingji is really a talent with endless potential. The Dark Thunder Guards have picked up a good seedling. Eunuch Gao, who had always been cold and serious, also raised a few smiles. This boy is really good, but he still needs more training. Eunuch Gao is still so strict. So, which people in this group do you think can enter the next round? Lei Mayan asked with a smile. Eunuch Gao did not answer directly, but looked through the information again. Lei Mayan was not in a hurry, so she waited calmly. After a while, Eunuch Gao said, I have 7 candidates in mind. Princess, why don't you take a guess? Hearing this, Lei Mayan suddenly raised her eyebrows. This zombie-faced Eunuch Gao was joking with her. This was really strange. It seemed that he was really in a good mood. She rolled her eyes and smiled charmingly. What a coincidence, I also have 7 candidates here. Why don't we write down the names of these 7 people and see if they are the same? Bring a pen and paper. Soon after, the two each took a piece of paper and exchanged it. When they saw the names written by each other, they looked at each other and smiled. Lei Mayan covered her mouth and smiled. Sure enough, great minds think alike. Just as they were talking, Donglin City's lord, Feng Luan, walked in. He first bowed and said, "Sirs, Lu Xingji and the others have returned." They came back quite quickly. "Call them in according to the names on this list. As for the others, you can go back." Lei Mayan picked up the paper and said. Feng Luan took it with both hands, then bowed and left. There were 23 people standing outside the hall, with Leng Shiqi leading the group. Feng Luan immediately said, "You are the first to complete the mission. First, I have to congratulate you. But you also know that completing the mission does not mean you can pass the test." Speaking of this, most of the people in the crowd held their breath. If they passed this time, they would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. If they failed, they could only go back home. Feng Luan took out the paper, and everyone's eyes were immediately attracted. He coughed and said, "Leng Shiqi." Leng Shiqi stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Thank you, Lord." "Don't thank me. You fought for it yourself. The two sirs are waiting inside. You can go in first." Feng Luan looked at Leng Shiqi with appreciation. Everyone took it for granted that Leng Shiqi could pass the test. No one had any complaints. Feng Luan continued to read the names: Di Chuan, Dongfang Qi, Bu Yangqiu, He Gaoi, Yin Xiafeng and Blood Moon. Chapter 451. Other than Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi, the rest of the 7 people that Feng Luan pointed out were all in the late stage of the spirit aperture realm. They naturally had no complaints about Leng Shiqi, but Delta Origi, who was only in the early stage of the spirit aperture realm, could also pass the test, which made them feel a little unfair. Although she had killed 2 early-stage spirit aperture realm opponents, which proved that she was not weak. But in the end, she was still in the early stage of the spirit aperture realm, and did not have a decisive performance in the entire mission. Why did she pass? The others felt unfair, but no one jumped out to question Feng Luan, because none of them were idiots. They knew that the decision was not made by Feng Luan, but by Eunuch Gao and Lei Mayan. Since the two had made such a decision, of course, it was impossible to change it. And none of them dared to argue with Eunuch Gao or Lei Mayan, unless they were crazy. Leng Shiqi roughly knew why Delta Origi was selected. Although everyone's mission was to destroy the extreme volcano village, taking all the resources of the bipolar mountain village was not a small contribution. Because of this, the bipolar mountain village was basically crippled. For a short period of time, they could only seek self-preservation, and could not come out to cause trouble. This time, the elites would be placed in Donglin County, and they even made a move against the spirit cultivator sections. This was a signal. It was a signal that the Thunderblaze dynasty wanted to completely control Donglin County in their hands. Anything that could suppress the spirit cultivator forces in Donglin County could be regarded as a contribution. And the matter of seizing the resources of the bipolar mountain village was led by Delta Origi, which was why she passed the test. Then, Leng Shiqi, Delta Origi, and the rest of the 7 people stepped into the hall and saluted. "Greetings to Manager Gao, greetings to Enforcer Lei. You guys, very good." Lei Mayan said, "We already know everything. The 7 of you have the most outstanding performance in this mission, so you can enter the next round." Next round. Hearing this, Dongfang Qi and the rest were stunned. Didn't they get to enter the dragon vein to cultivate after passing the test? Why was there a next round? Only Leng Shiqi secretly thought that his previous investment was right. What? Do you think that so many people are qualified to enter the dragon vein just because they destroyed a mere extreme fire manor? Lei Mayan sneered. However, she changed the topic. Of course, there are also rewards for passing the first round. Lei Mayan gave Feng Luan a meaningful glance. He immediately stepped forward and took out 7 items. Each item was wrapped in a layer of faint spiritual light. Taking a closer look, there were spirit tools, cultivation methods, spirit skills, pills, materials, and so on. Furthermore, these items were all at the 6th grade. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, there were very few people who could possess a 6th level treasure. For example, in their group, only Ling Shiqi and Di Chuan had 6th level spiritual tools. This was enough to make others envious. Feng Luan pointed to the 7 items and said, "These are your rewards. Choose according to the order of the list just now. Ling Shiqi, you are the first." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi took 2 steps forward. His gaze swept across the 7 items. He first eliminated materials and spirit tools. He had no use for materials now, and he didn't lack spirit tools. He still had to choose between cultivation methods and spirit skills. Regardless of whether it was a 6th level cultivation method or spirit skill, they were both precious resources that could only be encountered but not sought. Furthermore, these 2 resources were very important to Ling Shiqi. Spirit skills were needless to say, they were the foundation of his existence. Cultivation methods were also something he urgently needed. Currently, the spirit apertures in his body were enough for him to directly cultivate to the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm. However, after that, there was still a long way to go. That was to open all 360 spirit apertures in his body. If he wanted to open the spirit apertures, he would need a lot of cultivation methods. Furthermore, they had to be at the 5th level at the very least. Therefore, he had to collect some cultivation methods above the 5th level in advance. The 6th level cultivation method in front of him, Nirvana Remnant Wind Scroll, was very tempting to him. Especially since he had absorbed the Wind and Thunder God's Luck Stone, there was still a lot of pure wind and thunder power in his body. Cultivating this cultivation method would definitely be twice the result with half the effort. The 6th level spirit skill Black Lotus Demonic Fist beside it was also very interesting. Generally speaking, fist techniques were mostly firm and fierce. However, this Black Lotus Demonic Fist did the opposite. With one punch, the Black Lotus Demonic Chi would enter the enemy's body. This Black Lotus Demonic Chi was extremely sinister. It could absorb the spirit chi in the body to strengthen itself. It was equivalent to a parasite. Moreover, it was very tough and difficult to get rid of. It could be said that once the Black Lotus Demonic Chi entered the body, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, regardless of whether it was Nirvana Remnant Wind Scroll or Black Lotus Demonic Fist, Ling Shiqi wanted both. Therefore, he deliberately walked around these items a few times. He stood in front of the cultivation method and spirit skill for a little while, as if he was having a hard time making a choice. The others didn't rush him. In fact, Ling Shiqi had already secretly used his unlimited skill points to learn both cultivation methods and spirit skills. Only a child would make a choice. Then Ling Shiqi took away the elixir among the 7 items. Di Chuan immediately sighed softly. Obviously, he wanted this elixir. This elixir was called Crystallization Elixir. It was a necessary elixir to break through to Gang's spirit realm from Spirit Aperture realm. In the 4 realms of celestial being, to enter Spirit Pulse realm, one had to upgrade his Sea of Chi to Spirit Sea. To enter Spirit Aperture realm, one had to rotate his Spirit Sea to form spiritual spirals. If one wanted to break through to Gang's spirit realm, one of the necessary conditions was to condense spiritual spirals into spiritual crystals. That was to change the spirit chi in the body qualitatively and condense it into a material object. However, it was easier said than done. Li Xianyang, the head of Xianyang's sect, betrayed the whole sect in order to break through to Gang's spirit realm. He just wanted to get the Yuancher Aperture crystal to help him condense spiritual crystals. It could be seen how difficult this step was. The crystallization elixir could greatly improve the success rate of condensing spiritual crystals. It could be said that the value of this elixir was no less than that of the Yuancher Aperture crystal. As long as one had the crystallization elixir, one would be half a step into Gang's spirit realm. Of course, the crystallization elixir could only increase one's confidence. As for whether one could successfully condense spiritual crystals, it still depended on one's own ability. Di Chuan was now at the 9th level of Spirit Aperture Realm. His next step was to condense spiritual crystals. Therefore, he hoped to get the crystallization elixir the most. Unfortunately, Ling Shiqi beat him to it. After choosing, Ling Shiqi also noticed Di Chuan's strangeness. His eyes flashed slightly, and he stood aside. Then it was Di Chuan's turn. However, what he wanted most was gone. The destructive wind scroll was not suitable for him. He also had a 6th level spiritual sword, so he took the Black Lotus Demon Fist in the end. The rest of the people also chose what they wanted in order. In the end, only the 6th level materials were left for Delta Origi. However, Delta Origi did not care. The 6th level materials were also valuable. It was good to exchange them for other things. Chapter 452. The few of them received their respective rewards. Overall, they were very satisfied. Coupled with the resources that they had previously received, this alone made them feel that this trip was not in vain. Lei Mayan stood up and said, "You 7 are all the pillars of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. In the future, you will be the pillars of the Thunderfire Dynasty. We will be loyal to the Thunderfire Dynasty with all our strength," Ling Shiqi and others shouted at the same time. "This time, you have successfully destroyed the Extreme Fire Village. Of course, this is not the only reward. There is another reward for each of you." Ling Shiqi and others were all looking forward to it. Lei Mayan paused deliberately and said, "That is, an opportunity." They were stunned at first, but then they were all overjoyed. Except for Ling Shiqi, these people were all supervisors of the Dark Thunder Guards or commissioners of the Discipline Commission. When they broke through to the Gang's spirit realm, they would have the opportunity to be promoted to the Great Supervisor or Great Commissioner. However, it was only an opportunity. After all, there must be more than one person who was qualified to be promoted. Besides, there were very few positions for the Great Supervisor or Great Commissioner. Some people could even sit in this position for decades until they retired. So, even if they wanted to be promoted, they needed not only cultivation strength but also opportunity. And Lei Mayan gave them this opportunity. For example, Di Chuan was very likely to be promoted to the Great Commissioner after he broke through to the Gang's spirit realm. How could they not be happy? "Thank you, Lightning Executioner." Their voices were clearly more fervent than before. Lei Mayan chuckled and sat down again. Eunuch Gao continued, "The Extreme Fire Village has been destroyed. Then do you know why this sect was destroyed?" This was a problem that had been bothering Ling Shiqi and the others. If the Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Gang had a close relationship with the Mountain Sea Sect, then the Thunderblaze Dynasty would be able to slowly pull out the fangs of the Mountain Sea Sect. But the Extreme Fire Village had nothing to do with the Mountain Sea Sect. Why was it on the blacklist of the Thunderfire Dynasty? They looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. Eunuch Gao sneered in a cold voice, "Humph, that's because the Extreme Fire Village was determined not to change. I won't hide it from you. Not long ago, a prince secretly contacted Extreme Fire Manor, so Extreme Fire Manor shouldn't exist anymore." After Eunuch Gao finished speaking, he did not say anything else. However, his words shocked Ling Shiqi and the others. Everyone who could stand here was a shrewd person. They instantly understood the meaning behind Eunuch Gao's words. The Extreme Fire Manor saw that the current emperor didn't have much time left and decided to interfere in the succession. Ling Shiqi also felt that Zhu Huarong was being too whimsical. Perhaps he thought that this was an opportunity, but he neglected the fact that His Majesty was still alive. Based on the intelligence network of the Dark Thunder Guards, they had quickly found out that the Extreme Fire Manor was related to the prince, which was tantamount to ignoring the current emperor. If that was the case, the only outcome that awaited the extreme fire manor was destruction. At the same time, Ling Shiqi suddenly remembered that when Feng Sha-mo led them to destroy the Golden Wing Academy, someone seemed to have mentioned that the Golden Wing Academy had something to do with a certain prince. He couldn't help but think that the person who hired the Blood Garment Pavilion back then was most likely someone from the Thunderblaze dynasty. Eunuch Gao's eyes suddenly became as sharp as an eagle's. His gaze swept across everyone, and everyone who was stared at felt a chill run down their spines. Therefore, I hope that you won't meddle in other people's business. Do you understand? Dong Fangqi and the others immediately nodded frantically and secretly wiped off the cold sweat on their foreheads. Ling Shiqi also understood that Eunuch Gao's actions were to warn them not to get involved in the succession. Otherwise, they would end up like the extreme fire manor. Eunuch Gao's concerns were reasonable. Although the people present did not hold high positions, each of them had unlimited potential. The current emperor could at least hold on for a few more years. After a few years, these people could completely grow into the core power of the Thunderblaze dynasty. They were definitely worthy of being roped in by the various princes. Since you all understand, I can rest assured. Eunuch Gao then closed his eyes and seemed to be overwhelmed by sleepiness. Feng Luan spoke in a timely manner, you all completed the mission very quickly. Therefore, you have to wait for the other two groups to complete their missions before you can proceed to the next round. During this period of time, you can rest assured and stay in the City Lord's mansion. Speaking up to here, Feng Luan looked at Lei Mian and Eunuch Gao who were sitting high up. Seeing that they had no intention of speaking, he sent Ling Shiqi and the others away. However, just as Ling Shiqi was about to walk out of the hall, Eunuch Gao's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. I will come and find you at midnight. Ling Shiqi was secretly shocked. Thoughts flashed through his mind one after another, but he couldn't figure out why Eunuch Gao would come and find him. However, he had already made contributions, so no matter what, it shouldn't be a bad thing. After Ling Shiqi parted with the others, he decided to take advantage of the fact that it was still early to sort out the resources he had on him. He had obtained a lot of resources from the Extreme Fire Manor and the Bipolar Mountain Stronghold. Even if it was divided equally among more than 20 people, it was still equivalent to the lifetime wealth of an ordinary Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator. He first sold all the resources that he didn't need to the system and received more than 2,000 system coins. Including his original one, he already had more than 5,000 points. At first, before Ling Shiqi came to Donglin County, he had specially prepared 3,000 system coins for emergencies. Unfortunately, he hadn't used them yet. At this time, the system coins had increased by a lot, which made him want to draw a lottery. However, he still held back. Instead of relying on his luck, it was better to do something practical. For example, buy some experience pills for the Gu King. In the battle between Ling Shiqi and Ji Wen, he had also deeply experienced the strength of the Gu King, so he wanted to cultivate the Gu King as soon as possible. And experience pills were the fastest and most convenient way. Then, Ling Shiqi opened the interface of the shop and chose the intermediate experience pills that were worth 300 system coins each. He directly bought 7 of them. Ling Shiqi's system coins instantly returned to more than 3,000, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache. Instead, he summoned the Gu King and threw it an experience pill. The Gu King immediately flew around Ling Shiqi twice happily. Then, Ling Shiqi continued to sort out his resources. Of course, the most precious ones were the cultivation methods and spiritual skills. It was a pity that whether it was the cultivation methods or spiritual skills, the highest level was only the 4th level. The higher level ones should be in the minds of Zhu Huarong and Xiao Jingwu. Of course, Ling Shiqi didn't refuse them all and learned them all. This time, the spiritual skill library was expanded a lot, giving him more possibilities. In addition, the most precious ones were the awakening pills. Ling Shiqi had been in the 5th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm for a while. Now that he had settled down, he had plans to break through. He estimated that as long as he refined 3 awakening pills, it would be enough for him to break through to the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm. Chapter 453. Ling Shiqi raised his head and swallowed an Acupore's awakening pill. Then, he began cultivating. It wasn't until midnight that Ling Shiqi suddenly opened his eyes. Not far from him, a person had appeared without anyone noticing. It was Eunuch Gao. Eunuch Gao. While he was cultivating, he spared some of his attention to think about why Eunuch Gao had come to him. Eunuch Gao had come in the middle of the night. Obviously, there was something shameful going on. In the end, Ling Shiqi felt that Eunuch Gao was probably trying to recruit him. Now that he thought about it, Eunuch Gao had given him the Cold Nether Manual and a place in the elite association in the Western Wilderness Prefecture. Now that he had performed extremely well in the mission to destroy the extreme volcano village, he was even more worthy of being recruited. Greetings, Supervisor Gao. Ling Shiqi immediately stood up and saluted. Eunuch Gao did not speak. He just rolled his eyes, and an extreme chill that seemed to come from the netherworld suddenly appeared. The Cold Nether Manual in Ling Shiqi's body began to operate on its own. Ling Shiqi was shocked, but he did not resist. Then Eunuch Gao nodded gently, and everything returned to normal. You really have practiced the Cold Nether Manual. Apart from that, you also have several cultivation methods. You are not simple, Eunuch Gao said in a hoarse voice. Thank you, Supervisor Gao, Ling Shiqi bowed his head and said respectfully. He did not directly explain why he had practiced so many cultivation methods at the same time. Eunuch Gao curled his lips and did not ask further. Since you have practiced my cultivation method, you can be considered half a disciple of mine. Before Eunuch Gao could continue, Ling Shiqi immediately bowed and shouted, Greetings, Master. Eunuch Gao had only said 2 sentences since he arrived. Ling Shiqi did not hear any malice in those 2 sentences, so he planned to ride on this big ship. Before coming to Donglin County, Yu Ruifeng's words reminded him that even if Ling Shiqi performed well in the elite meeting this time, he would still have to go back to Western Wilderness County in the future. Then, at most, he would be able to sit in the position of patrol inspector. It would be extremely difficult for him to be promoted. However, if he was only an inspector, it would be unrealistic for him to complete the Blood Seed plan smoothly. Therefore, he had to find a backer within the Dark Thunder Guards to prepare for the future, and Eunuch Gao was very suitable. Therefore, Ling Shiqi wanted to give it a try. It would be great if he succeeded, but if he failed, he wouldn't lose anything. Eunuch Gao's expression changed slightly. Then, he laughed, and the wrinkles on his face trembled. You sure know how to climb up a pole. Interesting. Ling Shiqi flipped his hand and took out a mustard seed bag. This is a small gift that disciple has prepared for Shizhuan. Please accept it. What he took out was almost all the resources he had on him. As long as he could really open a path to Eunuch Gao, any amount of resources would be worth it. Eunuch Gao waved his hand and said, You are smart, but I can only accept you as a nominal disciple at most. Besides, how can I accept your things? On the contrary, I should give you a meeting gift. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi secretly thought that he had made the right bet. You have talent, ability, and skill. I like it very much. You can accept this. As he spoke, he took out a gray token. Ling Shiqi looked at it carefully. There was a mysterious pattern engraved on it, but he didn't find any clues. This is the Imperial Supervisor token. With this token, even the patrol inspector will have to be polite to you. Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows. Imperial Supervisor token. According to Eunuch Gao, this thing could even make the patrol inspector afraid. This was equivalent to giving him a lot of power. This disciple thanks Master for the reward. Ling Shiqi immediately lowered his head and said respectfully. Eunuch Gao nodded with satisfaction. Lu Xingji, you are a smart person. I see your potential, so I believe you will give me what I want. Ling Shiqi knew very well that Eunuch Gao was trying to rope him in because he wanted his loyalty. In a few years, there would definitely be a turmoil in the Thunder Flame dynasty. At that time, no one knew which prince would ascend the throne. As the saying went, a new emperor brings new ministers. Eunuch Gao, as the head steward, might not be able to stay out of it. Therefore, he had to start cultivating his own followers. Thus, Ling Shiqi said solemnly, this subordinate will definitely be loyal to Eunuch Gao. Hearing this, Eunuch Gao smiled again. He was very satisfied with Ling Shiqi. Seeing that Ling Shiqi was so sensible, he was even happier. Since you and I are considered master and disciple, I can let you go through the back door. The next test you will undergo will be very interesting. Very interesting. Ling Shiqi wondered if he had heard wrong when Eunuch Gao described the next test like this. However, he didn't expect Eunuch Gao to ask a very strange question. How are your survival skills? Ling Shiqi was stunned for a moment before replying, it's all right. He had the ghostly spring steps, a movement technique that was both light and teleportation. It was very good whether it was chasing or escaping. Eunuch Gao revealed a meaningful smile and said, that's good. However, before the other two groups complete their missions, you should think about your survival skills. This sentence made Ling Shiqi's heart skip a beat. It sounded like the next test would be very dangerous. This made him a little bewildered. The elite council was still a selection of talents, so there had never been any deaths. Even if they went to destroy the extreme fire village, there was still a lot of danger. However, if you didn't want to take the risk, you could of course give up. However, you would definitely be eliminated. Moreover, those who could enter the next round were prodigies among prodigies. The Thunderflame dynasty was eager to nurture them. Why would they joke about their lives? However, Ling Shiqi saw that Eunuch Gao didn't seem to be joking. Alright, that's all I have to say. You should prepare well. After saying this, a faint cold aura surged out of his body. Then, he silently left. Ling Shiqi was still carefully thinking about the meaning of Eunuch Gao's words. He then thought about how he didn't seem to have many survival skills other than the ghostly spring steps. This was because his fighting style was rather aggressive. He had always used offense as defense. His storm-like attacks could defeat his opponent in a short period of time. Therefore, he rarely used defensive spirit techniques. Looks like I have to use this time to get more defensive skills. Just as he was thinking to himself, a series of knocks came from outside and pulled his thoughts back. Brother Liu, I am Di Chuan. It's very presumptuous of me to visit so late at night, but I have something to discuss with you. Please see me. Chapter 454. Ling Shiqi heard the voice outside and chuckled. Di Chuan's visit was within his expectations, so he gathered his thoughts and opened the door. Brother Di, please come in. After the two sat down, Di Chuan went straight to the point. Brother Liu, I won't hide it from you. I came here to make a deal with you. As soon as he opened his mouth, Ling Shiqi knew what he was going to say. Di Chuan wanted nothing more than the crystal formation pill, but he still deliberately asked, Brother Di, please speak. Brother Liu should know that my cultivation is already at the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm, and I'm not far from condensing a spirit crystal, so I really need a crystal formation pill. Di Chuan looked at Ling Shiqi's expression and saw that he was expressionless. Di Chuan understood and continued, I came here with sincerity. Brother Liu, please state your conditions. Ling Shiqi thought that it was as expected. Actually, Ling Shiqi didn't really need this pill. First of all, in terms of cultivation, he was still a long way from the peak of the spirit aperture realm. Even if he broke through to the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm, he wouldn't be in a hurry to condense a spirit crystal because he still needed to open up all the spirit apertures. If he really could open up all the 360 spirit apertures in his body, then condensing a spirit crystal wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, he could take out this crystal formation pill to trade. Since they were going to make a deal, Ling Shiqi obviously wanted cultivation methods and spirit techniques the most. However, Dichuan definitely wouldn't hand them over so easily. Even if he was willing to take them out, they wouldn't be of high quality. Therefore, Ling Shiqi planned to see what Dichuan could offer first. He directly took out the crystal formation pill from his mustard seed bracelet and placed it in his hand. Brother D is really straightforward. I also need this crystal formation pill, but I don't need it urgently. If Brother D wants it, of course you can take it. I just don't know what Brother D wants to trade for it. Hearing that Ling Shiqi was willing to trade the crystal formation pill, Dichuan's face immediately lit up. He hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, please take a look." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper with many cultivation resources listed on it. This is the largest amount of resources I can use. Brother Lu can choose whatever you want. Pick at will. Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows slightly, but when he finished reading the list on the paper, his face sank again. He said with a displeased tone, "Brother D, forgive me for being blunt, but even if all these things are added together, they are still inferior to the crystal formation pill." Dichuan also blushed. "Brother Lu, this is all I have. If it's really not enough, can Brother Lu wait for a while? I will send a message to Ningyang County to transfer some resources over." Ling Shiqi shook his head, showing a hint of disappointment. "Brother D, you still don't understand. These resources are indeed a lot, but they are too ordinary and useless to me. Even if it was 10 times more, I wouldn't agree." Dichuan also understood what Ling Shiqi meant. These resources were not precious enough and their quality was too low. However, when Dichuan came to participate in the elite meeting, he didn't bring anything too valuable. It was impossible for him to come all the way from Ningyang County in such a short time. Just as he was frowning, he clapped his hands and suddenly thought of something. Then he took out something similar to a finger bone. This thing was grayish-white and didn't look like a human finger bone. Even if it was left motionless, there would be traces of gray qi lingering around it. As for Ling Shiqi, the moment he saw this thing, he could feel the evil aura from it. And it was a very familiar kind of evil qi. It was the same as the aura of the evil old man that Nine Leaf devoured in Shi City. Ling Shiqi was secretly surprised. He picked up the finger bone and looked at it carefully for a while, but he didn't see anything special about it. He only knew that this thing was definitely not simple. Dichuan saw that Ling Shiqi seemed to be interested in this thing, so he smiled. "Brother Lu, I got this thing by chance on my way from Ningyang County to Donglin Town. I have asked several treasure appraisers to appraise it. They all said that this thing is at least a 6th level treasure, but they can't see how to use it. If you like it, all the resources on the list and this finger bone will belong to you. What do you think?" Ling Shiqi began to ponder. After a long while, Dichuan became more and more anxious. Ling Shiqi said, "I'll take this finger bone, but I don't want the things on the list." Hearing this, Dichuan frowned secretly. Ling Shiqi must have other motives for not wanting the resources. He asked in a low voice, "What do you want, Brother Lu?" Ling Shiqi chuckled, "I want Brother D to stand on my side." As Ling Shiqi spoke, he looked directly at Dichuan. Dichuan quickly reacted. They were all going to enter the next round of the test. No matter who passed the test in the other 2 groups, they must all be outstanding. Then it was hard to say who would be the leader in the next round. After all, both Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha were strong competitors. So if Ling Shiqi wanted to continue to be the leader, he had to start winning people's hearts. Dichuan only hesitated a little, and then agreed at once. Not to mention the problem of resources, Ling Shiqi's terrible record of killing masters in Gang's spirit realm was enough to make Di Chuan bow his head. He nodded and said, "Brother Liu, don't worry. I will definitely support you in the next round." "Thank you, Brother Di. This crystallization pill is a thank you gift." Ling Shiqi handed over the crystallization pill in his hand. Di Chuan's face lit up with joy. After a few polite words, Di Chuan left happily. Ling Shiqi was still sitting in the chair. After a while, he glanced at a corner of the room and said coldly, "How long do you want to hide?" However, there was nothing there. Ling Shiqi snorted and flicked out a sword chi of 3 Ju. A black flame suddenly rose in that place, and a slim figure appeared. It was Lian Yi. In fact, Lian Yi had sneaked in when Di Chuan pushed the door open and left. It had to be said that her sneaking was very clever. Even Di Chuan, who was a whole realm higher than her, did not notice her. That was to say, Ling Shiqi's spiritual force was very strong, so he felt a trace of strange fluctuation. Lian Yi still wore the black veil on her face, but there was a trace of a smile in her eyes. "Mr. Liu is really sensitive." Ling Shiqi looked straight at Lian Yi. In his opinion, since Lian Yi could participate in the elite meeting with the cultivation of the late stage of spiritual pulse realm, she must have a great background. Lian Yi was very low-key in this task, or there was nothing for her to do, so she did not enter the next round. But then again, Lian Yi should be ready to leave Donglin County at this time. Why did she come here in the middle of the night? Ling Shiqi asked directly, "If you have something to say, say it." The smile in Lian Ye's eyes deepened. She said, "Should I call you Lu Xingji or Zhuqiu?" Chapter 455. When Ling Shiqi heard the name Zhuqiu from Lian Yi, he was shocked. He had used this identity to enter the illusory spirit's secret realm and fought with Lian Yi. However, Lian Ye's memory should have been tampered with by Meng Tianzong. How did she recognize him now? However, on second thought, Ling Shiqi realized that Lian Ye's memory should have been tampered with before she entered the alternate dimension of the Divine Dream Palace. Therefore, the memories of their initial battle still existed. Perhaps she had recognized him as Zhuqiu from some clues. Although Ling Shiqi was shocked, he still maintained a calm expression. He said indifferently, "If Miss Lian Yi is here to say these strange things to me, please leave." Lian Yi acted as if she did not hear Ling Shiqi's words and continued, "Actually, I came to the elite gathering purely to join in the fun. However, the moment I saw you, I felt a sense of déjà vu from you. However, I am certain that I have never seen you before. This has puzzled me, so I began to observe you. I have been observing you all this time. When you fought with Di Chuan and Ji Wen, even though your cultivation methods and spirit techniques were very different from before, there were still traces that could be traced, and there was still a sense of familiarity between your moves. I remember when I left the illusory spirit's secret realm, I knew that you and Ozu had obtained the Divine Illusion Palace's legacy cultivation method. I specially went to look through the secrets of the Divine Illusion Palace. In the end, I found that the spirit technique you used when fighting with Ji Wen was very similar to the 5-God flowing light technique recorded in the secret records. You can't be Ozu, so you are Zhuqiu." Ling Shiqi was truly shocked that Lian Yi could accurately identify the 5-God flowing light technique. This cultivation method was passed down from 10,000 years ago. Where did Lian Yi find the secret records of the Divine Illusion Palace to be so detailed? She even knew the cultivation method and spirit techniques like the back of her hand. Lian Ye's identity made Ling Shiqi even more surprised and curious. Since he had been recognized, Ling Shiqi no longer hid it. He said straightforwardly, "State your conditions." The condition he spoke of was naturally the condition for Lian Yi to keep his secret. Unexpectedly, Lian Yi shook her head and said, "I don't have any conditions. I just want you to answer a few of my questions truthfully." Lian Ye's actions made Ling Shiqi feel even more troubled. He said, "Ask away." Lian Yi sat opposite Ling Shiqi. She stared at Ling Shiqi with her black gem-like eyes and said, "I know you're not Cui Qiuyu either. That Cui Qiuyu is just an ordinary rogue cultivator. How could he reach the middle stage of Spirit Aperture Realm in 2 years and have the power to kill Gang Spirit Realm Masters? Therefore, Lu Xingji is your original identity, right? According to what I know, you are the disciple of Chu Hijin, a loose cultivator at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. He was also the one who pulled strings to stuff you into the Dark Thunder Guards. After that, you used your Spirit Pulse realm cultivation to quickly eliminate dissidents and secure your position as supervisor. After that, you single-handedly destroyed a third-rate sect, the Profound Yang sect. Then, you went on a diplomatic mission to Zhulu country. Coincidentally, Zhulu country went through a great change. When you returned, you were already at the Spirit Aperture Realm and had been promoted to Great Supervisor. It can be said that you are full of surprises and inconceivable. Therefore, I'm very curious, who are you? At the end, Lian Ye's eyes became somewhat cold. On the other hand, the more Ling Shiqi listened, the more shocked he became. Lian Yi had actually investigated him from beginning to end. Moreover, Lian Yi had been carrying out missions with him all this time. How did she find out? This Lian Yi can not only get detailed information about the Divine Illusion Palace from 10,000 years ago, but she can also find information about the West Baron Prefecture and even Zhulu country. In the Dark Thunder Guards, even the famous inspector might not have this kind of authority, right? Just who is she? Ling Shiqi thought to himself. At the same time, killing intent appeared in his heart. However, this killing intent was instantly dispelled by him. Lian Ye's identity indeed made him a bit cautious. Even if he wanted to kill her, he couldn't do it here. Therefore, he said, "Just as you said, you have already investigated my identity. You already know who I am, so why are you still asking me?" Lian Yi didn't seem to be satisfied with this answer. She said in a cold voice, "There is indeed no problem with your background. However, the problem is that before you appeared in the illusory spirit secret realm, there was nothing special about you. However, since the illusory spirit secret realm, your opportunities, cultivation, and strength have all increased at an unimaginable rate. I'm not boasting, but even in the entire Thunderflame dynasty, those who can cultivate to the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm at my age can be counted on one hand. However, you, in less than 2 years, jumped from the early stage of the Spirit Pulse realm to the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. Your identity also changed from a rank 1 rogue cultivator to a supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards. This kind of change was simply appalling. It's as if you've become a completely different person." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi laughed involuntarily. "These things may seem inconceivable to you, but everything I have today was exchanged with my life. You haven't experienced what despair is, you haven't stepped into the abyss. If you had experienced life and death several times, I think you wouldn't have come to question me." Lian Ye's eyes changed slightly. She stared blankly for a moment before saying, "What you said may be reasonable, but you are still very suspicious." Ling Shiqi finally understood. It seemed that Lian Yi hadn't reported her suspicions of him yet. She only came tonight to ask about it. This made him feel a bit more at ease. He replied, "I think you're thinking too much. My actions in the Western Desolate Province were all under the eyes of Supervisor Yu Ruifeng. Moreover, it was he who brought me to Zhulugua. However, there are some secrets that you don't know. If you really can't, you can ask Sir Yu what happened in Zhulugua. Moreover, it was Eunuch Gao who allowed me to participate in the elite meeting. You cannot believe me, but you can't not believe Sir Yu and Eunuch Gao, right? Could it be that I can control them?" He brought up Supervisor Yu Ruifeng and Eunuch Gao, one of the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Guards. This made Lian Yi start to waver. She thought to herself, could it be that I really missed some crucial information? This won't do. When I go back, I have to carefully investigate. This Lu Xingji is too outstanding. He will most likely be transferred to the headquarters in the future. He can't be unclean at all. Ling Shiqi saw that she didn't speak and struck while the iron was hot. He flipped his hand and a ball of cold underworld energy condensed in his palm. With your knowledge, you should be able to see what this is. This is cold underworld energy. You cultivate the cold underworld scripture. Lian Yi exclaimed in a low voice. At the same time, she looked at Ling Shiqi with a strange gaze. Chapter 456. Ling Shiqi admitted, that's right. This is the cold nether scripture. Eunuch Gao has already passed it to me. This means that I'm definitely trustworthy. Lian Yu was both surprised and puzzled when she saw Ling Shiqi use the cold nether scripture. She knew about the cold nether scripture. It was a cultivation technique created by Eunuch Gao. However, she had the impression that only Eunuch Gao's adopted sons cultivated this cultivation technique. Could it be that Lu Xingji is a... Lian Yi sized up Ling Shiqi, causing him to feel cold all over. However, most of the suspicion in her heart had been dispelled. She had some understanding of Eunuch Gao. If Ling Shiqi's background wasn't clean, then Eunuch Gao would definitely not pass the cultivation technique to Ling Shiqi. Eunuch Gao's actions not only proved that Ling Shiqi's background was clean, it also meant that he wanted to nurture Ling Shiqi as a trusted aide. Lian Yi lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Since that's the case, then I'll take it that I've wronged you. However, the matter of you attacking me in the illusory spirit's secret realm isn't over. This. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but be stunned. If he remembered correctly, it was clearly Lian Yi who attacked him first in the illusory spirit's secret realm. Why was it the other way around now? However, Ling Shiqi became vigilant when Lian Yi mentioned the illusory spirit's secret realm. After all, there were very few people who knew that he was Suoqiuyu, the person who obtained the inheritance of the Divine Illusion Palace's cultivation technique. If Lian Yi were to leak this news, it would definitely bring him endless trouble. Miss Lian Yi, you secretly investigated me for the sake of the Dark Lightning Guards, so I don't mind. However, I hope that Miss Lian Yi won't leak the fact that I once used the identity of Suoqiuyu. Of course. What Ling Shiqi did not expect was that Lian Yi would actually agree immediately. However, in the end, she rolled her eyes and said, but I have a condition. When he heard the word condition, Ling Shiqi felt even more assured. If Lian Yi didn't mention anything, then he would think too much. Speak your mind. If you come to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters in the future, help me do something. Lian Yi put forward her condition. However, this condition caused Ling Shiqi to frown. This kind of condition was the most troublesome. He asked in return, Miss Lian Yi is so confident that I will be transferred to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters. Lian Yi chuckled. Eunuch Gao even passed on the cultivation method to you. Wouldn't it be a matter of time before you were transferred to headquarters? Don't worry, the things I ask you to do will definitely be within the scope of your ability, and you will be compensated accordingly. Ling Shiqi hesitated for a moment. He could imagine that what Lian Yi wanted him to do was related to the internal strife of the Dark Thunder Guard. However, he was already on Eunuch Gao's side. If he agreed now, how would he explain himself to Eunuch Gao in the future? Seeing that Ling Shiqi was still hesitating, Lian Yi continued, don't think too much about it. That matter is my personal matter, but I can't tell you right now. Private matters. Then there was no problem. Helping her with a private matter could eliminate countless troubles. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. Thus, Ling Shiqi said, this one will listen to Miss Lian Ye's orders. However, if Miss Lian Ye's request is too excessive, then forgive this one for going back on his word. Okay, I believe Brother Lu won't go back on his word. It's late, this one will take her leave first. After Lian Yi finished speaking, she turned into a black shadow and left. Ling Shiqi looked at Lian Yi's departing figure with a cold glint in his eyes. Today's Lian Yi was much more mature and shrewd than before. However, it was still not deep enough. Fortunately, it was not deep enough. Ling Shiqi brought out eunuch Gao to wash away his suspicions, but there was a flaw in it. He made Lian Yi subconsciously think that eunuch Gao knew everything about him. In reality, eunuch Gao did not know that he had entered the illusory spirit secret realm with a fake identity in the celestial layer. Lian Yi was still a bit naive. Ling Shiqi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Tonight, 3 people had come to find him in succession. Among them, he had known about the arrival of eunuch Gao and Dichuan in advance. However, Lian Ye's appearance had really given him a wake-up call. Regardless of Lian Ye's identity, since she could investigate him so thoroughly, then there must be someone else in the Dark Thunder Guards who could find out. The reason why Lian Yi was able to confirm that he was Sui Chuyu was because she recognized that the rotating ice and fire flowing light array came from the 5-god flowing light art. It seems that I can't use any spiritual skills related to the 5-god flowing light art so easily. It's best if I confuse these spiritual skills again and change them. Ling Shiqi secretly made up his mind. Then, he used the soul-splitting technique to split half of his consciousness into the illusory spirit world and began to deduce and fuse the spiritual skills. Time passed bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The other 2 groups that had destroyed the Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Clan had also completed their missions. The destruction of these 2 sects had once again caused an earthquake in Donglin County. Although the destruction of the Extreme Fire Manor had attracted the attention of many people, it was still the Twin Pole Mountain stronghold that had destroyed it. There was a deep hatred between the 2 sides. Sooner or later, there would be a battle between the 2, so everyone discussed it for a while. However, in the short span of a month, the second-rate Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Clan had been destroyed one after another. 3 second-rate sects had ceased to exist in a row. This kind of thing had never happened in Donglin County. Even in the entire Thunderfire dynasty, there was no precedent like this. This instantly made everyone feel that a storm was coming. One had to know that these 2 sects were not just second-rate forces. They could be said to be the Mountain Sea Sect's pawn and the Mountain Sea Sect's money bag. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that someone was targeting the Mountain Sea Sect. However, the Mountain Sea Sect was a top force on the world's ranking of sects and dominated Donglin County. Who would dare to target the Mountain Sea Sect? Who would have the ability to target the Mountain Sea Sect? Moreover, many people had received information that these 3 destroyed forces had a large number of mysterious Spirit Aperture Realm experts participating. When did so many Spirit Aperture Realm experts appear in Donglin County? Connecting all these together, some people guessed that this was very likely the Thunderfire dynasty's doing. The dynasty wanted to suppress the Mountain Sea Sect and take back the hegemony of Donglin County. As the news spread, all the Spirit Cultivator sects in Donglin County were suddenly in danger. If this guess was true, then the dynasty and the Mountain Sea Sect would definitely fight. At that time, they might also be implicated. Weren't the Great Righteousness Sect and the Salt Clan the best examples? At this time, in the main hall of the Donglin City's City Lord's mansion, there were about 20 people gathered. These people were the instigators of the destruction of the 3 forces, and they were the best among them. Other than eunuch Gao and Lei Mayan who sat at the top, the others were clearly divided into 3 groups. They were respectively led by Ling Shiqi, Wu Diao, and Zhuge Puha. However, the number of people in these 3 groups was different. Ling Shiqi had a total of 7 people, which was the group with the largest number of people. Wu Diao had 6 people, and Zhuge Puha only had 5. At this moment, they were all standing with their hands behind their backs, looking respectful. Lei Mayan looked at the 18 people with a smile on her face. The 18 of you can be called the elites of the elites. Now, I will tell you the next round of the mission. Everyone's expression became serious. The first round of the test was to destroy a second-rate force, so the second round would definitely be more difficult. Chapter 457. Lei Mayan retracted her smile. She stretched out her jade-like arm, and bracelets flew out from it. The bracelets suddenly split into 5 different colored halos. She continuously formed seals, and the 5 bracelets instantly blossomed with radiance. Once again, they gradually overlapped with each other, forming a dusky light door. This is the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. There is a small space inside. Your test is inside, and your mission is to come out of the minor 5 elements chaos paradise alive. As soon as she said this, everyone's expression froze. Coming out alive was considered to have completed the mission. That meant that there was definitely danger inside that could threaten their lives. Of course, none of these people had any thoughts of wavering, and none of them were willing to withdraw. Because they knew that if they really passed the test, what awaited them would definitely be soaring into the sky. Not only could they enter the dragon vein to cultivate, their future path of advancement would be smooth. Under this kind of strong pressure, everyone became even more motivated. Lei Mayan flicked her finger, and instantly, more than a dozen streams of light hit everyone's body. Ling Shichi lowered his head to look, and a small blue token appeared in his hand. Coming out alive is the most basic requirement. Everyone has one of these tokens, and you can compete with each other without any restrictions. In addition, there are also some strange creatures in the paradise. Killing them can give you soul stones. 1 kilogram of soul stones can be exchanged for a token. After you come out, the 5 people with the most tokens will be considered to have passed the test. Everyone present looked at each other with hostility in their eyes. In the end, only 5 out of the 18 of them could pass the test. Moreover, they could snatch the tokens from each other. This was to let them kill each other. At this moment, everyone standing here was an enemy. Perhaps in this minor 5 elements chaos paradise, the most dangerous thing was not the strange creatures, but these people. Alright, the minor 5 elements chaos paradise can only be maintained for 7 days at most. Hurry up and go in. As for how to come out, you can think of a way yourselves. At this point, Lei Mayan waved her hand, and everyone walked into the gray door of light one by one. As soon as he walked through the door, Ling Shichi felt as if the world around him had turned upside down. However, he was still very calm. He had experienced this kind of situation many times and was starting to get used to it. When his eyes were able to see, all he could see was a thick layer of yellow sand. As far as the eye could see, this place seemed like a desert. And there was no one around him. Ling Shichi muttered to himself, "It seems that everyone has been separated." He looked around and found that the surrounding environment was almost exactly the same. There was not a single point of reference. Under such circumstances, even if he walked in a certain direction, he would unknowingly deviate from it. Moreover, he didn't know where to go. As Ling Shichi pondered, an idea flashed through his mind. He immediately opened the system map. Previously, he had spent a total of 10,000 system coins to obtain a full map. However, he did not know if the system map would be of any use in this mini chaos paradise. When he opened the system map, he saw that the map immediately showed 6 areas of different colors. The system map was actually effective. Ling Shichi could not help but be delighted. He remembered that when he was at Gushan Peak and was pulled into that small space by Tu Deng, the system map was not of any use. He could not help but sigh. That 10,000 system coins was really worth it. He immediately began to carefully study the map of this paradise. First, there were 5 areas of different colors that were distributed in a pentagon shape. He was currently in the yellow area, at the bottom right corner. He was not very far from the red area. These 5 regions should represent the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, and I'm in the earth region. It's a pity that this map can't show other people's locations. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi suddenly froze. Since the system map could be used, then the Fate skill should be able to be used as well. As long as he activated the Fate skill, he would be able to quickly find the others. Just as Ling Shiqi was about to activate the skill, the yellow sand under his feet suddenly shone with a strange rhythm. Immediately, Ling Shiqi suddenly knelt down. He actually felt as if his body was suddenly pressed down by a mountain, making it impossible for him to get up. His face was red, and layers of sweat instantly seeped out of his face. Even the blood in his body began to drop, and his meridians and bones emitted a slight friction sound. Ling Shiqi exclaimed in his heart, the gravity has increased. What surprised him the most was that the strength of his body was not weak. He had never forgotten to temper his body, and now, with just the strength of his body, he was comparable to a spirit cultivator in the early or middle stages of the spirit pulse stage. Even so, he was still pressed down by the invisible gravity to the point that he could not breathe. One could imagine how strong the gravity was. Ling Shiqi's mind moved, and black and red demonic chi surged as the demonic beast blood rune armor attached to his body, reducing the pressure on him by a lot. He could finally stand up with difficulty. However, he was still worried. He had a strong body in the demonic beast blood rune armor, so he could only stand with difficulty. What about the others? Wouldn't they be pressed to the ground and unable to move? What worried him was that in this situation, if the strange creature that Lei Mayan spoke of appeared, what should he do? If he couldn't even move, wouldn't that be the same as sending himself to death? Rustle, rustle, rustle. Suddenly, rustling sounds came from the surroundings, and then small mounds emerged from the yellow sand on the ground, as if something was about to come out. The corner of Ling Shiqi's mouth twitched. He didn't expect that he had the potential to jinx it. He hurriedly lifted his foot, but found that even lifting it a little was extremely difficult. Immediately, his entire body overflowed with demonic chi and gathered at his feet. He used the Netherworld Ghost Steps. The Netherworld Ghost Steps that could originally be as fast as a ghost could only allow him to run at the speed of a normal mortal. But in the blink of an eye, the small mounds around him finally broke out of the ground. Looking closely, they were monsters that seemed to be formed from small stones. These monsters were not big, only as tall as a person, but they did not have legs. They floated in the air, and with a casual movement, they could float more than 10 feet away. Seeing this scene, Ling Shiqi's heart was bitter beyond words. He remembered that night when Eunuch Gao had asked him about his ability to escape and survive. At that time, he was still a little confident. But now, it seemed that he had overestimated himself. Because even if he used his fastest speed, it was far from being able to compare to these stone monsters. Ling Shiqi took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed with a dense killing intent. Since he could not escape, then he would kill them all. Chapter 458. Ling Shiqi took out the Devil Advent battle saber, but the arm that was holding the saber's hilt suddenly dropped. He frowned and put away the demon arrival battle blade. It was already very difficult for him to move, and using a spiritual weapon here was a burden. Then, Ling Shiqi pointed his index finger, and a blood-red lightning shot through the air. The thunderclap blood heavenly finger was supposed to be as fast as lightning, but now it was affected by gravity, and its speed was much slower. Fortunately, the stone monsters did not seem to have much intelligence, and the thunderclap blood heavenly finger still hit one of them. The blood-red lightning instantly poked a large hole in the stone monster's body, but the stone monster did not feel anything and continued to stick close to him as if nothing had happened. Ling Shiqi used his fingers as a sword, and with a shake of his arm, dozens of tri-extinction sword chi were released in an instant, enveloping all the stone monsters around him. With a series of clanking sounds, the stone monsters were scattered by the tri-extinction sword chi, but most of them stood up shakily. Ling Shiqi's expression became more and more serious. These monsters did not have much intelligence, and their defense was not very strong, but they were very difficult to kill. If he did not specifically cultivate a body-tempering technique, he would be tortured to death by these monsters sooner or later. I can't fight them here, and the demonic beast blood rune armor can't be maintained for too long. I should leave this place first. Ling Shiqi changed his plan. He raised his hand, and a few fingernail-sized black crystals flew out from the fragments of the monsters he had killed. These were the soul stones that Lei Mayan had mentioned. Then, a large amount of cold air rose from his feet, and this cold air spread out like a wave, freezing all the stone monsters nearby. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he quickly activated the Faith skill, and the system map immediately appeared and began to enlarge. Ling Shiqi stared at the map, and there were indeed more than 10 figures on it. After 2 breaths, he found the location of the Delta Origi. However, his pupils suddenly shrank, and then, he disappeared in the red, blue, and yellow light. At this moment, in the wood region, this place was like a deep and serene forest. The only thing that stood out from the rest was that it was a withered forest. Although there were countless trees and all kinds of plants that he had never seen before, these plants were all withered and looked like they were about to die. And at this time, 2 people were fighting. One of them was dressed in a green robe that covered his face. Only a pair of cold eyes that were filled with killing intent could be seen. His cultivation was at the 7th level of Gang's spirit realm. With a wave of his hand, all the plants nearby were controlled at will as if they were his arms. It seemed that he was a spiritual caster of wood. The other person was the Delta Origi. At this moment, Delta Origi was completely at a disadvantage. The green-robed man's cultivation was far above hers, and in this unique environment, Delta Origi was already struggling. The green-robed man said with a cold expression, "A mere early-stage spirit aperture realm cultivator can enter this place. However, I happened to meet you, so I picked up a token for free. Little girl, hand over the token obediently. This place is constantly absorbing our spiritual energy. You will be defeated sooner or later. Give me the token now, and you may be able to save your life." Delta Origi did not answer because she had already seen the killing intent in the green-robed man's eyes. Therefore, even if she handed over the token, the green-robed man would still not let her go. Delta Origi immediately forced out more than 10 drops of blood essence from her fingers. Her face instantly turned pale, and the blood essence condensed into 3 sparkling bloodlines, and then attached to her autumn water-like long sword. The spiritual sword turned into a blood sword in the blink of an eye. Delta Origi was going to fight with all her might. However, Delta Origi's expression was normal. Whether it was on the Blood Fog Island or in the Blood Prison, she had fought with all her might too many times. When the green-robed man saw this, the smile on his face disappeared. He actually felt a trace of danger from Delta Origi's body. A person who had just entered the Spirit Aperture realm was actually a threat to him, a 7th-level Spirit Aperture realm cultivator. The green-robed man's hand seals flew, and the 2 towering trees beside him were uprooted, turning into 2 huge beasts that attacked from both sides. Delta Origi's blood sword trembled, and a layer of ghost fire ignited on it. Soon after, a blood-colored sword slashed out like a waterfall. The sword slashed on the huge trees, and immediately tore open terrifying scars one after another, but the huge trees did not feel the slightest bit. Every branch on the huge trees turned into sharp spears and long swords, ruthlessly stabbing towards Delta Origi, completely trapping her in a sinister cage. At this moment, the green-robed man could be considered to have forced Delta Origi into a desperate situation. She also had some explosive and escape methods, but once she used them, there was a possibility that her true identity would be exposed. But if she didn't use them, she might really die here. Just as Delta Orgy was about to use her trump card, a beam of red, blue, and yellow light suddenly appeared, and a figure wearing demonic armor walked out from the light. Delta Orgy and the green-robed man's gaze immediately turned towards him. To be able to appear in such a manner, he was undoubtedly an expert. However, the green-robed man did not know if this person was a participant of the elite meeting, or a monster that originally existed in this world. However, in the next moment, that person actually staggered a few steps forward, and almost fell to the ground. A stunned expression immediately appeared on the green-robed man's face. What kind of situation was this? Delta Orgy also recognized that this person was Ling Shiqi. She once saw Ling Shiqi wearing this demonic armor when he fought against the disciples of Liuha's spiritual region. Of course, Ling Shiqi was directly teleported over using the Fate skill. However, when he suddenly went from the gravity space of the Earth region to a normal space, his body was not used to it, so he almost fell. After he steadied himself, his pair of green-white eyes looked towards the green-robed man, and his eyes emitted undisguised killing intent. The green-robed man could not figure out Ling Shiqi for a moment. Just as he was about to test him, Ling Shiqi moved first. Ling Shiqi raised his hands to the sky, and a burst of dazzling light suddenly appeared. In an instant, a blazing sun with blazing green flames condensed into a blazing sun. The green-robed man's expression changed, and his hand seals changed, intending to order the two giant trees to attack Ling Shiqi. Unfortunately, at this moment, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. He only saw 5 tall giants that looked like gods appear in front of him, making him want to kneel at their feet. He even completely forgot what he was doing. At the same time, Delta Orgy used her sword technique, and a blood-colored crescent moon rose behind her. The poison sun shone brightly, and the blood moon was eerie. Under the sun and moon shining together, the two giant tree monsters were crushed one after another, and then the green-robed man who was distracted for a moment lost his life. The green-robed man, who was so arrogant just a moment ago, was instantly killed by the two of them. With the green-robed man dead, Delta Orgy finally breathed a sigh of relief. She nodded to Ling Shiqi, and then swallowed a pill to recover her spiritual energy. However, her face was still very pale. The pill could help her quickly recover her spiritual energy, but the blood she lost could only be slowly recovered. Ling Shiqi skillfully hooked the green-robed man's mustard seed bag, and secretly absorbed his remnant soul. At this time, Delta Orgy walked over, panting, and lifted the green-robed man's hood with the tip of her sword. Who is this person? It seems to be Zhuge team. Ling Shiqi shrugged, a dead person's name, don't worry about it. Chapter 459. That's true. Delta Orgy nodded slightly. Ling Shiqi removed his war beast armor and looked around. When he came to this area, he quickly noticed that the spiritual energy in his body was constantly overflowing. This should be the restriction of the wood area. However, compared to the abnormal gravity of the Earth area, this place was really much better. After all, which person who could enter the second round didn't have a large number of pills on them? As long as the pills weren't exhausted, the loss of spiritual energy was completely within an acceptable range. But Ling Shiqi thought about it again. If this was the only restriction, then the difference between this place and the Earth area was too big. So he asked Delta Orgy, apart from this green-robed man, did you encounter any other dangers? Delta Orgy shook her head and said, no, I bumped into him not long after I arrived. We fought without saying anything, and then you suddenly appeared. Ling Shiqi's appearance was also bizarre, but Delta Orgy didn't ask too much. Because she knew that Ling Shiqi had too many secrets and was full of all kinds of inconceivable things, so no matter what shocking actions Ling Shiqi did, she would feel that it was normal. The reason why this place is called the Minor Five Elements Chaos Paradise is that it is divided into 5 different areas according to the 5 elements. In the middle of them, there is a very mysterious place. Let's call it the Chaos Area. When I entered this paradise, I appeared in the Earth area. That place is full of terrifying gravity. Even if I use all my strength, I can barely move. It can be said that it is very dangerous. And this place doesn't seem to be too dangerous, but it is a bit unreasonable. Ling Shiqi said what he knew, what he experienced, and what he guessed. Delta Origi fell into deep thought. According to Ling Shiqi, this place was indeed a bit too peaceful. Let's not think about this for now. Bu Yangqiu is also in the wood area. Let's meet up with him first. The more people there are, the easier it will be to deal with the danger. Before Ling Shiqi prepared to teleport, he also memorized the area where everyone was and their approximate location. There were only 5 or 6 people in each area, and they all encountered various threats. For example, the temperature in the fire region was extremely high, and there were monsters similar to flame spirits inside. The water region was a world of ice and snow, and many snow giants were chasing after the spirit cultivator. The air of the metal region was filled with needle-like, formless radiance. There were also groups of golden armored guards in formation. As for the chaotic region, even the system map would not be able to detect it. While the 2 of them swallowed the pills, they carefully rushed towards Bu Yangqiu's direction. Along the way, it was very peaceful and they didn't encounter any monsters. However, when they arrived, they didn't see Bu Yangqiu. There wasn't even anyone in Byakugan's field of vision. Ling Shiqi wasn't too surprised. After all, it had been quite some time since he used fate. Bu Yangqiu might have moved to another location. Ah! Just then, Delta Origi made a sound of surprise. What's wrong? Ling Shiqi turned to look at Delta Origi and found that her face was very strange. Delta Origi first closed her eyes, as if she was sensing something. After a few breaths, she suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She anxiously said, "There's something wrong with my spirit energy. Quick, check your spiritual energy." When Ling Shiqi saw Delta Origi's appearance, he knew that she must have discovered something big. He hurriedly looked inside and quickly found the problem. That was, his spirit energy had decreased. This wasn't a decrease after he used his spirit technique, but a permanent decrease. Logically speaking, after using a spirit technique, the spirit energy in his body would definitely be consumed. However, as long as he spent some time, the spirit energy would naturally be replenished. But now, Ling Shiqi found that the upper limit of his spirit energy had decreased. In other words, his cultivation was regressing. "I understand," Ling Shiqi said in a deep voice, "our spirit energy is not slowly decreasing, but disappearing forever." At first, Ling Shiqi did not pay too much attention to the spirit energy in his body. Although he was a little strange that the recovery speed of his spirit energy was slower than before, he did not think too much about it. Now, it seemed that although there was no great danger in the wood region, the hidden danger was more terrifying than the earth region. Spirit energy was the foundation of a spirit cultivator. As the saying goes, the path of spirit cultivation was like sailing against the current. Now, Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi's spirit energy cultivation was gradually decreasing. This was a little difficult for the 2 who pursued power to accept. At the same time, they thought that they had to leave this region first. Ling Shiqi immediately opened the system map. He compared it with the distance he had traveled. The wood region should be about 100 miles in radius. There were 2 regions closest to them. One was the metal region, and the other was the mysterious chaos region. Soon, Ling Shiqi made a decision to go to the chaos region. This minor 5 elements chaos grotto heaven was clearly centered around the chaos region. Perhaps their final test would be in the chaos region. Of course, there might be greater danger in there, but Ling Shiqi really could not bear the feeling of his spirit energy being drained for no reason. He chose a direction and led Delta Origi straight to the Chaos region. With their speed, it would only take half a day to reach the Chaos region. In this dense forest, two exceptionally nimble figures constantly flitted past. But suddenly, Ling Shiqi's body paused. Delta Origi suddenly stopped and turned her head in confusion. Ling Shiqi's face was gloomy, and there was even a trace of disbelief on his face. Delta Origi rarely saw Ling Shiqi with such an expression. She subconsciously asked, "What did you notice?" Sigh. Ling Shiqi sighed deeply. This wood region is far more complicated than we thought. The reason why he sighed was because when he opened the map to see how far they were, he was shocked to find that they had actually gone astray. At this time, they should have almost reached the intersection of the two regions, but now they were actually back to the center of the wood region. When Ling Shiqi said this, Delta Origi was also shocked. This kind of thing had happened before on Blood Mist Island, but at that time, they had only just entered the spirit transformation realm and were confused by the fog. Now, the two of them were both in the spirit aperture realm. Ling Shiqi's spiritual power was enormous, and his perception was far beyond that of spirit cultivators of the same level. He also had the Byakugan and the system map in his hands. How could they have unknowingly gone astray? How was this possible? Chapter 460. Ling Shiqi quickly calmed himself down. He thought about it carefully and realized that there was actually a way to deal with this predicament. As long as he kept Byakugan and the system map open, he could still leave this place after finding the right direction. At this moment, he finally understood that the danger of the wood region did not lie in the monsters, but in the fact that they would trap you here and slowly drain your spiritual energy. If you stayed here for too long without leaving, your cultivation realm would drop again and again. At that time, even if you were lucky enough to leave, you would not have enough strength to face other dangers. It could be said that the wood region was a soft knife. Now, it seemed that when they went to find Buyangqiu, it was not that he had gone far, but that they had already deviated from their original direction. Then what should we do now? Delta Origi asked. Ling Shiqi calmed himself down and said, "Don't worry, I have a way. I was a bit careless before." After saying that, Ling Shiqi directly opened Byakugan, and everything within a radius of 12 miles was within his field of vision. At the same time, he kept opening the system map to correct his direction. "Let's go." The two of them started to walk again, but this time, their path was very strange in the eyes of others. They would change their direction every once in a while, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, and sometimes even to the back. But in reality, they were indeed slowly approaching the Chaos region. Ling Shiqi looked at the mark on the system map and his heart completely calmed down. At first, when he first entered the minor Chaos Paradise and found out that the system map could be used, he was actually a bit happy. This was equivalent to activating a full map hack. It made him feel like he had everything under control, but it was this mentality that caused him to suffer a little. If he was more cautious and careful, he should have already reached the Chaos region. Now, he had wasted so much time for nothing and lost a portion of his spiritual energy for nothing. This was the price he had to pay. While Ling Shiqi was running, he could not help but look at Delta Origi. Delta Origi's cultivation was only at the first level of the spirit aperture realm. If they stayed here for too long, their cultivation might drop. If his carelessness caused the Delta Origi to fall, he would not know how to face the Delta Origi. However, the Delta Origi didn't notice Ling Shiqi's gaze because they could already see layers of gray fog in their field of vision. That was the primal chaos region. When the two of them got closer, they immediately felt an indescribable aura from the gray fog. It gave them an ominous feeling. Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi looked at each other, their eyes filled with determination. This area is the center of this mini paradise. There must be quite a bit of danger inside. We must be extra careful. As Ling Shiqi spoke, he donned his demonic beast blood rune armor and gripped his inky jade sword. He was ready to fight at any moment. Delta Origi also took a deep breath. Her ink-black hair instantly turned gray, and her entire body gave off a dangerous feeling. Immediately, the two of them walked into the gray fog together. The surrounding scenery suddenly changed, but the scene in front of Ling Shiqi was a little unexpected. He thought that the gray fog was so ominous that there must be some demons and ghosts inside. Who would have thought that what appeared in front of him at this time was a lush green valley? All kinds of flowers were in full bloom, and the breeze carried bursts of floral fragrance. It was like a paradise. Only the gray fog floating in the sky made people feel a little depressed. What was even more amazing was that the spiritual energy here was abnormally rich. Moreover, it was not the normal spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It did not seem to contain any strange attributes, but the purest spiritual energy that was close to the origin. No matter what attribute you cultivated, you could cultivate to your heart's content here. Ling Shiqi could not help but blink, afraid that he was mistaken. This place clearly looked like a paradise. He muttered, "The primal chaos region is actually like this. What do you think, Delta Origi?" However, he did not hear Delta Origi's voice. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly turned around, but there was no one beside him. Ling Shiqi gripped the inky jade sword tightly, fully activating his Byakugan and perception. However, to his surprise, his Byakugan could only detect the situation within 1 mile. As for his perception, it could barely leave his body. The primal chaos region can actually greatly suppress perception and detection. Ling Shiqi was secretly shocked. But even so, Delta Origi can't move 1 mile away in an instant. That gray fog is very strange. Ling Shiqi could not help but frown. He had just found Delta Origi, and not long after, they were separated again. Delta Origi was still injured, and her cultivation was not high. He was more or less a little worried. However, on second thought, Delta Origi was able to come out of Blood Mist Island and Blood Prison. This proved her strength and ability. Moreover, Delta Origi was the disciple of Bone Demon. She must have some trump cards in her hands. She should not be in danger for the time being. Ling Shiqi looked left and right, found a small path, and walked along it. He was vigilant at all times, and after about an hour, he actually saw a small village in the distance. The village was not big, but it was still crisscrossed with traffic. Smoke rose in spirals, and from time to time, he could hear a few children's laughter. There was a village in this place. There were still living people in this place. Ling Shiqi subconsciously felt that something was wrong. He was very careful as he approached the village. Just as he walked to the entrance of the village, he heard a burst of wind blowing from inside. Then, a funeral procession came out. At the front, there was a middle-aged man with a pale face wearing mourning clothes. He held a white banner, expressionless. Behind him, 2 people walked and scattered paper money. Behind him, there were 4 people carrying a heavy coffin. There were dozens of people following behind them, all of them crying and wailing. However, there were also a few children in colorful clothes who were laughing at the back of the procession. They seemed a little out of place. Ling Shiqi's greenish-white eyes kept flashing with spiritual light. There seemed to be nothing wrong with this group of mourners. Everyone here was made of flesh and blood, and they were all living beings. In other words, these people were all real people. Ling Shiqi watched coldly as the procession walked past him. He did not expect that the last old man to notice him. The old man walked over and showed Ling Shiqi a kind smile. "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Ling Shiqi sensed again. The old man in front of him did not have any abnormalities. He was a very ordinary person. He put on a harmless smile and said, "I've traveled for a long time, and I'm tired. I'll have to trouble you then." Chapter 461. The old man brought Ling Shiqi into the village. Ling Shiqi looked around as he walked. The entire village seemed very peaceful. The villagers in the village were also more hospitable. When they saw Ling Shiqi, they would smile warmly. However, Ling Shiqi always felt strange because these people's smiles were full of hypocrisy. The old man brought Ling Shiqi to a black canopy that had been set up. Inside the canopy, there were round tables that were more than 100 feet long. Every table was filled with people who were eating and drinking heartily. The old man said, "Guest, what a coincidence. There is a wedding banquet today. Guest, if you are weak, please take a seat." Wedding banquet. Ling Shiqi glanced at the old man. This was clearly a funeral banquet. When did it become a wedding banquet? Leaving the sea of suffering and ascending to paradise, isn't this a wedding banquet? The old man explained. "Old man, you are right." Ling Shiqi nodded, but he did not take a seat. Because in his perception, these people were not eating delicious food. They were clearly eating rotten maggots. The wine they were drinking also exuded a strong smell of corpses. Ling Shiqi naturally could not eat or drink these things. At this time, the burly man next to him handed over a bowl of wine. "Guest, this is the strongest wine in our village. Come and try it." Before the burly man finished speaking, he poured the bowl of wine directly into Ling Shiqi's mouth. Ling Shiqi snorted coldly, and an invisible spiritual force spread out and pushed the burly man away. However, the strange thing was that Ling Shiqi had clearly controlled this spiritual force to a very weak level, but the burly man directly scattered like a paper man. But this burly man's corpse did not bleed at all. The burly man's head that had fallen to the ground still had a smile on it. "Guest, what do you mean by this? Are you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit?" At the same time, everyone in the black tent quieted down. Everyone turned to look at Ling Shiqi with a smile. That kind of smile made people shudder. The old man squinted and said, "We are treating the guest well, but the guest wants to kill. This is your fault." Everyone who was originally sitting came over with a bowl of wine. They still had a warm smile and said, "Guest, come and drink. Drink a bowl. Don't be shy." Like a demon's voice that lingered in Ling Shiqi's ears directly penetrated into his heart, making his state of mind unconsciously had a trace of extreme irritation. "Humph." Ling Shiqi snorted and said, trying to be mysterious. Immediately, the spiritual force around his body erupted like an invisible vortex swept out. In an instant, the entire black canopy was sent flying, and everyone around it was torn apart. What was even stranger was that this time, all of them looked just like real people. Blood splattered everywhere, broken limbs flew everywhere, and some scarlet blood even splashed onto Ling Shiqi's face. The feeling of blood was so real, it was as if he had killed hundreds of innocent lives in an instant. Ling Shiqi wiped the blood off his face in a daze. An indescribable emotion emerged in his heart. In fact, to this day, there were many people who died at the hands of Ling Shiqi, but all the people he killed were spirit cultivators, and they were all killed for the sake of survival, for the sake of benefits. He had never killed an ordinary person. He had always treated killing as a method, not a bloodthirsty person. Now, the scene in front of him was like hell on earth, but it felt so real that it actually aroused the killing intent in his heart. Just as everyone in the vicinity was dead, Ling Shiqi only felt a blur in front of his eyes. He was actually standing at the entrance of the village again. There was a funeral team coming out. The leader was still the expressionless middle-aged man, and at the end of the team was still the kind-looking old man. What was going on? At this moment, Ling Shiqi did not know why he had returned here, nor did he know how to recover. He also did not know how the old man was resurrected. Although he knew that all of this should be fake and was very likely an illusion, his eyes and feelings told him that all of this was real. The old man walked towards Ling Shiqi and said, "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Everything was exactly the same as what Ling Shiqi had experienced before, even the old man's words were exactly the same. What the hell is going on? Ling Shiqi suddenly felt extremely annoyed. He used his finger as a sword and instantly released hundreds of triple extinction sword chi that covered the entire village. The icy blue triple extinction sword chi swept everywhere, constantly strangling everyone here. In just a dozen breaths of time, the entire village had become a dead village. What Ling Shiqi did not know was that his eyes had begun to turn slightly red. However, in the next moment, the village was restored again, and a group of people rushed out of the village. Ling Shiqi's killing intent surged, and his eyes flashed with a bloody light. Suddenly, he formed the grasping flower seal, and a faint Buddhist light appeared, suppressing the killing intent in his heart. Phew! Ling Shiqi let out a heavy breath. He had just killed all the villagers in the village, and they were all ordinary people, who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Although he knew that these were not ordinary people, the feeling was extremely real. It almost made him addicted to endless killing and become a madman who only knew how to kill. Fortunately, his willpower was strong, and he had the grasping flower seal, a Buddhist secret technique that specialized in suppressing evil thoughts, so he woke up just as he was about to become a demon. He could not help but think to himself, "This is really something." In this chaotic area, his eyes and the power of perception could no longer be trusted. Instead, they had become a channel for him to fall into a predicament. Then, Ling Shiqi simply closed his Byakugan and withdrew all his perception. At this time, the old man came over again and said the same thing. This time, Ling Shiqi also smiled and said, "Okay, this junior has been traveling for a long time and is really tired. If it is convenient, this junior would like to stay here for a night." The smile on the old man's face froze for a moment. Then, he brought Ling Shiqi into the black shelter. The burly man once again handed over a bowl of smelly wine. This time, Ling Shiqi did not attack. Instead, he drank the bowl of wine very generously. The disgusting smell immediately filled his mouth and nose, making him feel nauseous. However, Ling Shiqi's expression did not change. Instead, he praised, "Good wine, good wine." Another bowl. The smiles on the old man and the burly man's faces stiffened for a moment, but they immediately returned to normal. The burly man directly picked up a jar of wine and shouted, "Our guest is really straightforward. Today, we must drink this jar of wine. Come, let's get drunk." Ling Shiqi rolled up his sleeves and started eating and drinking with the table full of people. He smiled as he swallowed the rotten food and corpse water into his stomach. After a while, a little boy about 4 or 5 years old wearing a red dutu came bouncing over. A glint flashed across Ling Shiqi's eyes as he thought to himself, "Finally." Chapter 462. The boy hopped over to Ling Shiqi's side and stared at him with his big round eyes full of curiosity. The boy asked in a coquettish voice, "Big brother, do you know what you're eating and drinking?" Ling Shiqi looked at the food on the table and said, "Of course I know, but is this all you've got? Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? Or is it that very few people have been able to do this for a long time, so you didn't prepare any backup plans?" The boy's expression instantly turned incomparably cold, and his originally innocent eyes were also covered with a layer of frightening gray fog. The surrounding villagers also withdrew their smiles, and all of them stared coldly at Ling Shiqi. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared to death in this environment and atmosphere, but Ling Shiqi smiled coldly. What, you want to kill me now that I've exposed you? You're trying to make me lose myself here, become a madman, and finally drive me to my death. I have to say that your methods are indeed very clever. This is a bit like an illusion, but it's also beyond illusion. No matter how strong my spiritual power is, it's useless. Instead, I'll fall deeper. So if I want to break out of this situation, if I want to kill you, what I need is not strength, but a state of mind. At this point, Ling Shiqi gently flicked his finger, and a translucent ripple spread out. Wherever the ripple went, the scene turned into nothingness. Including the old man, the strong man, the tables of banquets, and the houses disappeared. In the end, there was only a strange monster half the size of a person left in front of Ling Shiqi. This thing was like an irregular cloud of smoke, floating in front of Ling Shiqi. At this moment, the monster's hollow eyes revealed boundless astonishment. You, how can you break my illusion? I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Ling Shiqi said emotionlessly. Then, he straightened his palm and slashed out the god-vanquishing void-slashing blade towards the monster's vital spirit. The monster did not seem to have a physical body. It would have been very difficult to deal with, but the god-vanquishing void-slash happened to be the bane of this kind of creature. The monster was instantly cut in half and returned to chaos as it screamed. Only a fist-sized crystal was left behind. It was the Soul Stone. Ling Shiqi weighed the Soul Stone in his hand. The Soul Stone didn't look small, but it weighed about 3 or 4 taels. He then compared the Soul Stones that he had obtained from killing the stone monsters and found that the larger Soul Stone seemed to be much purer. The two added together weighed about half a kati, which was equivalent to half a token. Not bad, Ling Shiqi murmured. But at this moment, Nine Leaves' voice suddenly sounded. This is the smell of souls. Upon hearing this, Ling Shiqi was shocked. Senior Nine Leaf, you've awakened. No, I haven't completed my advancement yet. Right now, it's just a wisp of my consciousness. I was attracted by the aura of souls. Ling Shiqi thought to himself, so that's how it is. But from what Nine Leaves said, this soul stone actually contained soul power. After refining this thing, it can directly increase the strength of the soul. Help me collect some. As for the reward, we'll talk about it after I fully awaken, Nine Leaf continued, but her voice sounded a little weak. Okay, but Senior Nine Leaf, how do I refine this thing? Just eat it. Ling Shiqi, eat it. As a monster, Nine Leaf could eat it, but Ling Shiqi could eat it directly. However, when Ling Shiqi asked again, he didn't get a reply from Nine Leaf. Ling Shiqi pinched the soul stone and put it in his mouth. Suddenly, there was a burst of stench. It was really difficult to swallow. He quickly held his breath, thinking that he had eaten the most disgusting things in the illusion anyway. This was nothing. He steeled his heart, opened his mouth, and swallowed the soul stone. Soon after, he felt a strange power enter his mind. It was as if a pair of gentle hands were comforting his soul, making him feel as if he was floating. Then, his spiritual power also increased a little. Ling Shiqi carefully sensed it. Just this small piece of soul stone had increased his spiritual power by as much as half a month of refining. With a joyful look on his face, he muttered, "This soul stone is really good stuff. No wonder even Nine Leaf is envious." Of course, although this thing was good, if you wanted to get a soul stone, you first had to be alive to take it. Ling Shiqi went from the earth region to the wood region, and then here. The dangers he experienced were extremely high. For example, that strange monster just now. If it wasn't for his extraordinary willpower, he would have lost himself long ago. Speaking of which, if he wanted to refine the soul stone to increase his spiritual power and collect some for Nine Leaf, how would he pass the test? Lei Mayan had said that only the top 5 people with the most soul stones and tokens would pass the test. So now, Ling Shiqi needed a large amount of soul stones, a lot of soul stones. Ling Shiqi looked left and right, then chose a direction and continued forward. At the same time, on the other side of the chaos region, there was a viscous sea of blood. In the center of the sea of blood stood an exquisite body. It was Delta Origi. At this moment, the sea of blood around Delta Origi condensed into blood-colored spears that stabbed into her body. Then, the blood-colored spears disappeared, but another spear appeared from another angle. Now, Delta Origi's body had dozens of bloody holes. Blood flowed out of her body, but her expression was abnormally tenacious and cold. Her eyes were as bright as gems, and revealed a cold expression. "Is this all you've got? Is this all you've got?" "Not enough, far from enough. The pain I've endured is far beyond your imagination." Delta Origi roared like a madwoman. She used her fingers as a sword, and a translucent blood sword condensed in the void. The blood sword slashed down, and actually tore through the sea of blood, hooking out a monster that looked like an octopus. The sword flashed, and the monster was instantly beheaded. A lump of soft flesh spread out on the ground, still wriggling. The sea of blood around them disappeared, and even the wounds and blood on Delta Origi's body disappeared. If Ling Shiqi was here, he would definitely recognize it. It was this method again. It was similar to an illusion, but on a higher level. If Delta Origi broke the trap, her wounds would be fake. But if she didn't break the trap, those wounds would be real. In a dark wasteland, a group of monsters with only one mouth were devouring a body. In the end, only a skeleton was left. However, the skeleton still flickered with a faint yellow light. "Eat, eat. If you don't eat now, you won't have the chance." After that, the skeleton actually grew flesh and bones, instantly transforming into a thin middle-aged man. He was Wu Diao. Wu Diao waved his hands, and without any spiritual light, the ground suddenly shook. The ground surged like waves, and in just a few breaths, the man-eating monsters were buried here forever. In a magnificent palace, more than a dozen young girls were dancing. There were also a few girls sitting around a handsome young man, whispering into each other's ears. The young man's eyes were not moved at all. On the contrary, they were filled with disdain and killing intent. "You dare to provoke this young master with this kind of trash? Scram!" Then, the young man stretched out his 5 fingers, and starlight appeared on his palm. Endless starlight shone throughout the palace, and the girls were all turned into ashes. This young man was Zhugapuha. The ground within a radius of 100 feet suddenly turned into mud. There were sticky spider webs everywhere, which greatly limited the speed of that person. The big palm fell, and that person had no choice but to resist with all his might. There was a loud sound of metal clashing, and the long spear in that person's hand was shattered. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string. In terms of pure explosive power, the ultimate Yang hidden palm was second only to Ling Shiqi's divine flash epiphyllum. Coupled with the support of Ling Shiqi's physical strength, he won so easily. However, that person was only seriously injured and was not dead yet. He said in horror, "Let's talk things out. Let's talk things out. We're all here to participate in the elite meeting. There's no need to fight to the death." Ling Shiqi ignored him. He didn't think this way when he attacked Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi's demonic aura rose. A demonic cloud rose, and a demonic dragon with no head or tail appeared. It spat out 2 ferocious demonic dragon claws and tore that person in 2. Ling Shiqi picked up the mustard seed bracelet that was left. In addition to a large amount of resources, there were 4 kilograms of soul stones and 2 tokens. This meant that at least 2 people had died at his hands. They only had 18 people in total. If they counted the green-robed man from before, at least 4 people had died. This fight was more intense than he had imagined. However, Ling Shiqi thought that this person's method was indeed quite creative. He used a secret technique to disguise himself as someone who was neither human nor ghost. Even Ling Shiqi was fooled at first. Most people would test the waters first when they encountered such a situation. They would never fight for real. This gave this person a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He was able to kill 2 people in such a short time. This showed that this method was indeed useful. Ling Shiqi rubbed his chin. Then, a crackling sound came from his body, and his body became short and stooped. He then took out the old man's skin mask that he had used for a long time and put it on his face. With a thought, he activated the breath-holding technique, and the aura on his body became undulating, making it difficult for others to grasp. Finally, he picked up the blood-stained raincoat on the ground and put it on. Like the previous person, he began to fish. Unfortunately, Ling Shiqi's luck wasn't very good. He waited for half a day but didn't see a single person. However, he wasn't anxious. Perhaps some people were already trapped in the 5 elements area. He believed that with the ability of those people, it wouldn't be a big problem for them to come to the chaos area. Sure enough, on the 2nd day, he finally saw the first fish he waited for. It was a young man wearing light armor. However, his light armor had traces of being broken and burned. It seemed that he came from the fire area and had some injuries on his body. When the young man saw Ling Shiqi, he was slightly stunned. Then he frowned and quickly looked around. There seemed to be a few traces of brown light flashing in his eyes. He did this because he didn't think that there would be a fisherman here for no reason. He began to wonder if he had fallen into an illusion. Splash! A sound attracted the young man's attention. He turned his head and saw Ling Shiqi fishing out a severed arm from the pool. Young man, this old man just caught a fish. It's still fresh. Do you want to take it back and try it? Ling Shiqi imitated the old man's voice and said. When the young man heard this, his face became serious. He hesitated for a few seconds and suddenly smiled brightly. This junior is just passing by. How would I dare to take this senior's things? This old man is in a good mood. Take it. Ling Shiqi said and threw the severed arm directly at him. The young man dodged subconsciously. However, he didn't expect that at the moment he dodged, Ling Shiqi's figure also disappeared. The next moment, the Devil Advent Battle Saber appeared and a terrifying saber light condensed to the extreme slashed down. It was a flash in the pan. That young man was already injured, and now that he was caught off guard, he was actually beheaded by Ling Shiqi with a single slash. Today I caught another big fish. It's a good harvest. Chapter 464. Ling Shiqi happily counted the gains he had just obtained. This way of obtaining ill-gotten wealth was really fast. One had to know that those who could enter this small 5 elements chaos grotto heaven were the elites of the elite association. They had brought a lot of resources with them. In addition, there were also many soul stones, which made Ling Shiqi earn a lot. Now, he had as many as 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones on him. However, this fishing method could not be used for too long because there were only 18 people here. Now, almost half of them were probably dead. Moreover, a few of them were his own people. Therefore, Ling Shiqi planned to earn 2 more batches before stopping. At this moment, he looked at the soul stones in his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then swallowed them all. A full 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones were refined by Ling Shiqi. Suddenly, a faint golden light bloomed behind his head. That was a sign that he was about to condense a primordial spirit. In the system of spiritual power cultivation, the first spiritual power transformation was to condense a spiritual body and open up a spiritual space. The second qualitative change was to sublimate the spiritual body into a primordial spirit. From then on, the primordial spirit became a second life. Even if the physical body was destroyed, as long as the primordial spirit was alive, one could still live. Generally speaking, only spiritual casters who were in the unity of heaven and man realm were qualified to condense a primordial spirit. Ling Shiqi was showing signs of this now. If this spread out, it would definitely cause an uproar. In fact, Ling Shiqi's spiritual power talent could only be considered good, but it was definitely not the best. The biggest qualitative change in his spiritual power came from the spiritual fantasy world. The spiritual fantasy world could be said to have completely changed Ling Shiqi's spiritual power aptitude. Whether it was the strength of his spiritual power or the potential, it had been raised to a level that was rarely seen. His spiritual fantasy world had also unexpectedly fused with the heavenly face soul crystal. This thing was constantly increasing Ling Shiqi's spiritual power. Moreover, Ling Shiqi had been using his spiritual power to deduce spiritual techniques for a long time, which greatly improved his spiritual power. Furthermore, he had used the Hell's Curse to absorb remnant souls. Now that he had refined so many soul stones, his spiritual power was finally going to undergo a second transformation. Ling Shiqi sensed it as well. His eyes lit up with joy. He had a feeling that if he refined another 5 kilograms of soul stones, he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. His desire for soul stones grew even stronger. After that, Ling Shiqi continued to pretend to be the old man and fish. In the next 2 days, he successfully caught 2 fish, but one of them escaped. Ling Shiqi didn't chase after the man. Although it might expose his opportunistic methods, he had already planned to stop, so it didn't matter if it was exposed. The other strange thing was that recently, for some reason, some ghosts would often come looking for him. Of course, in the end, they all became Ling Shiqi's soul stones. On this day, when Ling Shiqi was about to remove his disguise, a jade-faced young man walked over. He saw that the surrounding area was a mess caused by several battles, and there were many bloodstains scattered around. The jade-faced young man raised his sword-like eyebrows and said, "Are you a man or a ghost?" Ling Shiqi recognized the jade-faced young man as soon as he saw him. This man was Zhuge Puha. With a faint smile, Zhuge Puha looked Ling Shiqi up and down with interest in his eyes. Ling Shiqi knew that his disguise had been seen through, so he simply returned to his original appearance. "Lu Xingji, it's you." Zhuge Puha wasn't too surprised. Those who could disguise themselves as ghosts and sneak attack others must be very powerful. Ling Shiqi belonged to this group of people. "Brother Lu, you must have gained a lot here." Ling Shiqi smiled and said, "You're flattering me. Why, do you want to have a share of the loot? I heard that Brother Lu once killed a master of Gang's spirit realm. Your strength is outstanding. I'd like to have a taste of it." A 7-star long sword appeared in Zhuge Puha's hand, and his body suddenly emitted a strong fighting intent. Ling Shiqi held the black jade sword in his hand, and in an instant, a violent killing intent enveloped Zhuge Puha. For Ling Shiqi, there was no such thing as a taste of it. There was only fighting to the death. Zhuge Puha's long sword moved, and a few faint stars appeared in the gray sky. The power of the stars was drawn into the long sword, and suddenly a destructive starlight burst out. Ling Shiqi's sword shook and was covered with a thick layer of bloody light. In an instant, blood qi surged and evil qi raged. Seeing this, Zhuge Puha frowned slightly. The evil qi released by Ling Shiqi was not just his spiritual technique. Looking at this posture, it was obvious that Ling Shiqi was stained with too much blood. Zhuge Puha had never seen this level of evil qi from a spirit aperture realm cultivator. Unconsciously, Juga secretly increased his strength. The power of the stars was drawn down by him from the ninth heaven. He pointed the tip of his sword and drew a star map in front of him. The star map unfolded, and everything within 100 feet turned into a starry sky. Ling Shiqi's turbulent evil chi was greatly suppressed in an instant. Interesting. Ling Shiqi thought. He quickly observed the starry sky and found that it seemed to be similar to a trap array, but it was different from ordinary arrays. Juga could set up an array with his bare hands, which was really extraordinary. Brother Lu's evil chi is too strong, why don't you wake up first? Juga saw that Ling Shiqi was temporarily suppressed and said with a slight smirk. Ling Shiqi expressionlessly changed his sword for a blade. The moment the demon arrival blade appeared, it caused the air around him to tremble. 7th rank artifact. Seeing the demon arrival blade, Juga was shocked. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, those who had a 6th rank spirit artifact could be counted on one hand. Ling Shiqi could actually take out a 7th rank artifact. How was this possible? Ling Shiqi held the demon arrival blade and felt the battle intent and killing intent in the blade. He gathered all the power in his body and compressed it. Juga pupils shrank and his heart inexplicably felt a trace of panic. His expression was finally not as calm as before. His long sword moved continuously and streaks of sword chi stirred up the heaven and earth, sweeping over. Facing these sword chi, Ling Shiqi's expression still did not change. The demon arrival blade in his hand had already begun to vibrate with a buzzing sound, as if it was very excited. Ling Shiqi suddenly swung his blade. Pure demonic chi soared into the sky and turned into a ray of blade light. The ray of blade light was dozens of feet long. It tore through the starry sky and erased the sword chi, as if it wanted to devour Juga as well. Juga did not expect that Ling Shiqi could still use such a terrifying blade technique under the suppression of his starry sky array. However, there was no time for him to be shocked. He quickly formed hand seals and the starlight around him condensed into strange runes. These runes flowed rapidly and disturbed the space around him, making it impossible to see his figure clearly. At the same time, Ling Shiqi's blade light arrived. Chapter 465. Ling Shiqi's saber light was still extinguished by those strange runes. This move of his was not divine ephemeral epiphyllum, but it was purely a demonic ephemeral epiphyllum, based on his demonic aura and devil advent saber. After all, divine flash epiphyllum consumed too much energy. Unless it was a matter of life and death, Ling Shiqi would not use it easily. Facing Juga Ling Shiqi could not underestimate him, so he used demon flash epiphyllum. This move was not very powerful, but it was more than enough to break Juga starry sky. Juga finally blocked Ling Shiqi's blade, but his runes had all dissipated. Seeing that Ling Shiqi was about to continue his attack, he waved his hand and said, "Brother Lu, please wait." Ling Shiqi's movements paused. Brother Lu's strength is really extraordinary. I admire you. If we were in the outside world, I would definitely be willing to learn from you. But in this secret realm, there are dangers everywhere. I think we should stop. Juga put away his long sword and said. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi also put away his devil arrival blade. He was fishing here, mainly targeting those who were not particularly strong and were injured. But for an opponent like Juga Ling Shiqi was not confident that he could kill him if he did not use all his strength. Moreover, as Juga said, there were ghosts everywhere in this chaotic area. It would be irrational for them to fight to the death. At present, although Ling Shiqi had a slight advantage, neither of them used all their strength. It was best to stop before the real fight started. Seeing that Ling Shiqi had retracted his blade, Juga secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had only exchanged 2 or 3 blows, the pressure that Ling Shiqi gave him was too great. The devil arrival blade in Ling Shiqi's hand was terrifying enough. It was a 7th level magical weapon, which even a master of Gang's spirit realm might not be qualified to own. Zhuge Puha's long sword was also a 6th level spiritual weapon, which was rare in the same level. But compared with the devil arrival blade, it was nothing. If they continued to fight, he might lose his spiritual sword. It wasn't just the devil arrival battle saber. Ling Shiqi's spiritual technique and the murderous aura on his body made Zhuge Puha feel a lingering fear. He thought that he was a 1-in-a-million genius, but today, in this short period of time, the arrogance in his heart had been worn away a little. Ling Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "I won't see you off." After Zhuge Puha left, Ling Shiqi began to carefully examine the Devil Advent battle blade in his hand. When he fought with Zhuge Puha just now, he found that the Devil Arrival blade seemed to be more useful than before. It was not that it was sharper, but there was a faint connection between the two, which made it very easy for him to use. He gently stroked the blade, and the Devil Arrival blade immediately trembled, as if it was responding to Ling Shiqi. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi raised his eyebrows and showed some joy. Obviously, the Devil Arrival blade's spirituality was higher than before. It was infinitely close to a 7th level magical weapon. Perhaps this was the reason why Zhuge Puha mistakenly thought that the Devil Arrival blade was a 7th level magical weapon. Although Ling Shiqi did not know the reason, it was a good thing anyway. After that, he continued to wait here for half a day. Unfortunately, he did not meet anyone else, so he gave up this method and walked towards the center of the chaotic area. However, he did not go far before he suddenly stopped. He looked to the right, where there seemed to be a huge figure walking towards him. Ling Shiqi immediately activated Byakugan. Although Byakugan could not see through things in the chaotic area, it could still greatly enhance his vision. Only then did he see clearly that the thing was several feet tall, wearing heavy gray armor, and had no flesh on its body. It held a gray bone spear in its hand, but its face was covered in a black fog, making it difficult to see its face. However, Ling Shiqi estimated that it was either a rotten zombie face or a skull. Of course, Ling Shiqi did not care about that. He was more concerned about the feeling that this thing gave him. It was very dangerous. Moreover, ever since he entered the chaotic area, he had encountered many ghosts, but almost all of them used illusions to control their enemies. Their actual combat strength was not strong. However, the monster in front of him was the complete opposite. It was just slowly walking over, but it gave Ling Shiqi the feeling of a mountain pressing down on him. Before they even fought, Ling Shiqi knew that this monster would be very difficult to deal with, so he planned to just leave. Anyway, this monster did not seem to be very fast, so he could easily shake it off. However, just as Ling Shiqi was about to leave, the nearby gray fog suddenly twisted. Suddenly, a bone spear several feet long stirred up the wind and clouds, and arrived in the blink of an eye. Ling Shiqi was shocked. The demonic beast blood pattern armor and the holy silver deer's beast chi battle patterns instantly appeared. He turned into a black and white stream of light and quickly dodged the spear. Even so, the sharp wind from the spear left a few cracks on his demonic beast blood pattern armor. Seeing this scene, Ling Shiqi's heart sank. If he had been hit directly, his armor would have been shattered. The strength of this monster was actually so strong. At the same time, Ling Shiqi also felt that a consciousness had locked onto him. The source was from this skeleton monster. Now, even if he escaped, he would be chased by this monster. In this way, if the monster caught up with him while he was fighting with others, he would be attacked from the back and the front. He suddenly felt that he was very unlucky. Ling Shiqi stared at the skeleton monster, and his eyes flashed with boundless fighting spirit. Since he could not get rid of it, he would kill it. This monster was very strong, but it also had a very obvious weakness, which was that it was very slow. He did not have no chance. On the contrary, it was best at suppressing people with speed. Immediately, Ling Shiqi summoned the Goo King. It turned into a pair of colorful glass wings and soared into the sky. He unsheathed the inky jade sword, and hundreds of triple sword chi poured down. The skeleton monster pulled out its bone spear and suddenly raised its head. Two ferocious blood rays burst out from the black fog. It waved the bone spear, and suddenly, a cold wind whistled. The fog and the surrounding 100 feet flowed like a whirlpool, swallowing Ling Shiqi's triple sword chi. However, Ling Shiqi, who was flying in the sky, chuckled. Of course, he did not think that the triple sword chi could hurt the skeleton monster. His purpose was only to attract the skeleton monster's attention. At the same time, four Ling Shiqi figures strangely appeared around the skeleton monster. Each Ling Shiqi was quickly forming seals. Rays of light like spider silk shot out and intertwined with each other, and soon weaved into a huge spider web that enveloped the skeleton monster. Finally, the four Ling Shiqi pressed their hands together, and the ground where the spider web was located collapsed, forming a muddy swamp. The skeleton monster had just blocked Ling Shiqi's triple sword chi, and it was firmly restrained. Ling Shiqi wanted to continue to expand his advantage in speed. Then the Ling Shiqi in the sky also landed. The 5 of them surrounded the skeleton monster in a pentagonal formation, and 5 different colored formations appeared. Each formation slowly rotated, and star-like light spots condensed one after another. In an instant, countless streams of light surged out and mercilessly strangled the skeleton monster. This was the rotating ice and fire stream light formation after Ling Shiqi's transformation. Chapter 466. Last time, Ling Shiqi had used the ice-fire flowing light array against Ji Wen, but Lianyi had recognized it as the 5-god flowing light technique. Therefore, while waiting for the other 2 teams to complete their missions, he had also improved the ice-fire flowing light array. Not only did it change its appearance, but its power was also increased. Especially after Ling Shiqi had refined a lot of soul stones, his mental strength had increased a lot. With the support of the divine Gu Ring, the ice-fire flowing light array's power was terrifying. The skeleton monster was trapped by the spider webs and swamps. These things were not enough to trap it for a long time, but this little bit of time was enough to make it completely passive. The skeleton monster's armor made ear-piercing clanking sounds under the attack of the endless flowing light, making it difficult for the skeleton monster to move. Soon, the armor on the monster's body began to crack, and a large amount of gray mist began to seep out of the cracks. Seeing that it was effective, Ling Shiqi's spiritual power surged even more violently, and the ice-fire flowing light array became brighter. Caw-caw, more and more cracks appeared on the skeleton monster's body, and finally, it was blasted apart. However, Ling Shiqi frowned. This monster died just like that. This was somewhat different from what he had expected. He had thought that this would be a fierce battle, but it was over just like that. Especially in Ling Shiqi's perception, the aura that locked onto him was still there, so this skeleton monster was not dead. Ling Shiqi did not dare to slack off. As expected, as the rotating frostfire flowing light array gradually dissipated, the broken bodies of the monsters in the surroundings gathered together again with the black fog. In the blink of an eye, the array was restored to its original state. Oh! An immortal body. Ling Shiqi secretly guessed. No, there is no such thing as an immortal body in this world. It just happened to borrow some kind of power. The fog in this chaotic area might be the source of its power. Ling Shiqi looked at the fog that was everywhere in the chaotic area and felt a headache. If his guess was correct, then he could not kill this monster at all. At this moment, the skeleton monster took a step forward, causing the entire ground to tremble slightly. The long spear swept horizontally as if it was 10,000 pounds heavy. The monster's speed was not fast, but its attack speed was very fast. Ling Shiqi's hands pressed down, and a dark golden brilliance flashed, and the ultimate yang hidden palm fell. This large handprint was a spiritual technique that was both offensive and defensive, and it also had a suppressive force. As the large handprint smashed down heavily, a sonorous sound that almost shattered one's eardrums could be heard. The ultimate yang nether passage great palm had actually shattered. However, Ling Shiqi's Mahamudra managed to block about 80% of the skeleton monster's spear's power. The rest of the power was offset by Ling Shiqi's demonic beast blood tattoo armor and his own physical strength. Ling Shiqi suddenly felt the blood in his body churning. At the same time, he was very surprised that the skeleton monster was so strong. In terms of pure strength, this monster was the strongest opponent Ling Shiqi had ever fought. Facing this monster with obvious strengths and weaknesses, Ling Shiqi also felt that it was very difficult to deal with. No matter how strong your attack was, the monster could resurrect, but if you were hit, you might lose your life. The key was that Ling Shiqi could not think of any way to completely kill it. Even if he used God, Ephemeral Bloom, he was not confident that he could kill it. Ling Shiqi thought about it. Currently, he really did not have many means to restrain this monster. In his opinion, the only way to deal with this monster was to use thunder or divine power. However, although he also practiced the thunder destruction formation and the flower grasping stance, the grades of these two spiritual skills were too low. Even if they could restrain the monster, they would not cause any substantial damage. At this time, a light suddenly flashed in Ling Shiqi's mind. He remembered that he also had a very strong thunder power in his body. That was what he obtained when he absorbed the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone. It was just that Ling Shiqi had never used it before, so he almost forgot about it. Although the Thunder Destruction Formation was a low-level spiritual skill, it was not weak with his current Spirit Aperture Realm 5th level cultivation. With the addition of the thunder power in his body, he might be able to give it a try. As soon as he thought of it, Ling Shiqi's body trembled and instantly split into several phantoms. Each of the phantoms was quickly forming seals. At the same time, thunder burst out from his body, and it was full of crackling sounds. Several phantoms responded to each other, and in an instant, a thunder formation had been formed. Ling Shiqi's hand seals changed, and the thunder power in his body surged out. The originally dark blue thunder turned silver gray. Immediately after, dozens of thunder pillars fell down and fiercely smashed into the skeleton monster's body. The thunder power naturally had a great restraining ability against these evil things. At this moment, under the thunder destruction formation, the skeleton monster's body was twitching and trembling, and there were even traces of mist spreading out. Seeing that the monster was about to be torn apart again, Ling Shiqi's expression became gloomier. Because he could deeply feel that the thunder destruction formation could not kill the monster. His thoughts and ideas were correct, and the thunder power did have some effect, but the problem was that the thunder destruction formation's grade was too low. Even if it was supported by the thunder power in the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone, it would only be comparable to the power of the rotating ice and fire flowing light array. Furthermore, the power of lightning in his body was not his own. It was stored there. It was like water without a source. Every time he used it, it would be depleted. There was no way to replenish it. Therefore, he could not use the thunder power of this intensity for a long time. This method would not work. Pang! With a loud bang, the skeleton monster shattered again. However, the fragments were slowly gathering back together. It seemed that it would be reborn soon. Ling Shiqi was anxious. He could not be delayed by the skeleton monster. If he consumed too much spiritual power, it would be dangerous. Immediately, he took advantage of the time when the skeleton monster was reborn and quickly opened the system shop interface. He was planning to go to the system shop to try his luck and see if there was anything useful. Unfortunately, the 8 items that entered his eyes were all useless. Ling Shiqi immediately clicked the refresh button, and the items immediately changed to 8 other items. Among them, there was a pill that could directly increase his cultivation. He wanted it, but the price of the pill was not cheap. He was afraid that he would not have enough system coins left after buying it, so he could only reluctantly click the refresh button again. This time, the items that appeared made Ling Shiqi's eyes light up. Especially one of the level 6 spiritual skills. Perhaps it could really help him kill the skeleton monster. Level 6 spiritual skill, Great Bright Fist, 2000 system coins. Chapter 467. The Great Bright Fist was one of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques. Buddhist techniques were naturally effective against all kinds of dark and evil things. The Great Bright Fist also contained a portion of the power of light, so it was even more effective against them. Ling Shiqi did not hesitate for a second. He immediately bought the Great Bright Fist and used his unlimited skill points to start cultivating it. Unfortunately, the Great Bright Fist was a level 6 spiritual technique. Therefore, even if he used his skill points to learn it, it would still take some time. Just as Ling Shiqi cultivated the Great Bright Fist to the minor completion realm, the skeleton monster had already been reborn. Ling Shiqi immediately threw a punch. Suddenly, a burst of light shone brightly. Under this punch, the area within a radius of 100 feet was enveloped in a dense light. The skeleton monster had just been reborn. Under the intertwining of the light, its body began to gradually melt like snow under the scorching sun. However, judging from its aura, the monster was not completely dead. This time, however, its rebirth speed was much slower. Ling Shiqi was secretly delighted when he saw this. His punch was only at the minor completion realm, and it had such an effect. If it was at the great perfection realm, wouldn't it be able to instantly kill the monster? Taking advantage of the gap between the skeleton monster's rebirth, Ling Shiqi used his skill points to upgrade the Great Bright Fist again. After about 10 breaths, his consciousness returned. The Great Bright Fist was already at the great perfection realm. After that, the Buddhist radiance around him flourished, and a pure and holy radiance flickered out. OM. A light droning sound resounded as an area of over 1 kilometer around Ling Shiqi was filled with boundless pure and holy Buddhist radiance, and it purified and dispersed everything. The Buddhist light shone like the sun, illuminating the dark sky of the primal chaos region. After a short while, when the Buddhist light dissipated, the skeleton monster's corpse was nowhere to be seen. Ling Shiqi let out a breath of turbid air. Although he was not injured in this battle, the pressure of facing an extremely powerful force still made him tense. Moreover, he had previously fought with Zhuge. The consecutive battles had drained his spiritual energy. He walked forward and picked up a huge soul stone from the ground. It was left behind by the skeleton monster after its death. He casually weighed it in his hand. This soul stone actually weighed 7 to 8 kilograms. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but smile. Now, all he had to do was find a place to refine the soul stone and he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. Next, he found a huge rock nearby and used the hand of the earth to hollow it out. He then placed dozens of goo worms around it before drilling into the huge rock to recover his spirit energy. 2 hours later, Ling Shiqi held the skeleton monster's soul stone in his hand and swallowed it with great difficulty. His soul power began to tremble slightly, and traces of strange power spread out, causing his spiritual power to grow rapidly. At this moment, Ling Shiqi was trying to condense his primordial spirit according to the method recorded in the 5-God flowing light technique, and his spiritual illusion world was gradually changing. Ling Shiqi's spiritual body was almost the same as his own, which meant that his spiritual power had almost reached saturation. At this moment, the spiritual body began to shrink again. Time passed little by little, and Ling Shiqi's spiritual body kept shrinking until it was only the size of a palm. However, the spiritual body was constantly blooming with a dazzling green brilliance, just like a small sun. This moment was the most crucial moment for Ling Shiqi to condense his primordial spirit. Spiritual power was originally an intangible thing, but the primordial spirit was substantial. In other words, Ling Shiqi was now undergoing a qualitative change, which was to sublimate the intangible spiritual power into a substantial substance. At this moment, his spiritual power began to flicker. This was the process of a qualitative change. This process could be said to be very important for a spiritual caster, but it was also very dangerous. This was because once the condensation of the primordial spirit failed, it would cause great damage to one's spiritual power and could even harm one's foundation. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi had refined the soul stone and had the support of a large amount of spiritual power. This way, it was only a matter of time before he condensed his primordial spirit. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The heaven-face soul crystal, which had been quietly staying in the illusion world, suddenly trembled. Ever since he opened the illusion world, the heaven-face soul crystal was like the core of the illusion world. However, this thing had been very quiet for a long time, so much so that Ling Shiqi almost ignored it. But at this moment, the heaven-face soul crystal suddenly rose from the ground and flew into the air of the illusion world. Then, there was a "kacha" sound, and the heaven-face soul crystal actually shattered. Furthermore, it had been shattered into countless pieces, falling down like fine powder. Ling Shiqi was at the critical moment of condensing his primordial spirit. He also noticed that the heaven-face soul crystal seemed to have changed, but he didn't know what exactly happened. Even if he knew, he was powerless at this moment. After the green powder fell, it slowly circulated around Ling Shiqi's spiritual body. If one looked carefully, they would see that the powder was seeping into Ling Shiqi's spiritual body. For Ling Shiqi, condensing his primordial spirit was a relatively difficult process, and he was prepared for a long battle. Fortunately, his primordial spirit had fused with the heaven-face soul crystal and was much more solid. That was why he could stay in the outside world for 2 or 3 breaths of time. Otherwise, his primordial spirit would inevitably dissipate. Chapter 468. Ling Shiqi took a few deep breaths with lingering fear. His joy from condensing a primordial spirit had also dissipated. At this moment, he suddenly heard a faint voice coming from outside. There were people nearby. Ling Shiqi immediately activated Supercilious Eye. Originally, Supercilious Eye didn't have much use in this chaotic region. However, after condensing a primordial spirit, his mental power had a qualitative leap, and Supercilious Eye's effect had also increased. Now, he could already scout out a range of 300 meters. He immediately saw the appearance of 2 spiritual auras, and he recognized both of them. These 2 were Dichuan and Buyangqiu. However, the strange thing was that Buyangqiu's aura was very weak. He was only at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm. Ling Shiqi remembered that Buyangqiu had stayed in the wood region before. He must have been trapped there for a long time, which caused his cultivation to drop quite a bit. At this moment, the 2 of them were talking. This is too unlucky. Why are there so many monsters nearby? Dichuan didn't seem to be in a good mood as he said angrily. We are already quite close to the center. It is normal for there to be more monsters. Thanks to Brother D's care, I was able to survive until now. I really don't have anything to repay you with. Buyangqiu said with a slightly flattering tone. He had no choice but to flatter. He had followed Dongfang Qi in the beginning of the elite meeting. At that time, Dongfang Qi and Dichuan had competed for the position of leader, so their relationship wasn't that good. Bu Yangqiu also used all his trump cards to leave the wood region. Now that his strength was greatly damaged, he could only rely on Di Chuan to have some hope of surviving. Therefore, he had no choice but to lower his head. Actually, the two of them didn't expect the competition to be so fierce before they entered the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. In their impression, the elite meeting was at most a competition between everyone. There had never been a situation of life and death. However, this minor 5 elements chaos paradise was filled with killing intent. Not only were there great dangers in every region, the most dangerous thing was actually the people. Di Chuan had come from the metal region. He had also encountered an assassination attempt in the metal region. In the end, he had relied on his profound cultivation to kill his opponent. It was also because of this matter that Di Chuan brought Bu Yangqiu with him, treating him as a shield. Boom! Just as they were talking, a huge rock not far away suddenly exploded. The two of them instantly activated their protective spiritual armors and looked over with great vigilance. Di Chuan tightly grasped the Tier 6 spiritual sword. He vaguely saw a figure among the fragments of the boulder, and that figure was somewhat familiar. "Don't be nervous, it's me." Ling Shiqi's voice came over, causing both of them to be slightly stunned, but it immediately turned into joy. Ling Shiqi's strength was obvious to all. It would be safer to meet up with him. "So it's Brother Liu." "Greetings, Brother Liu." Bu Yangqiu lowered his posture even more in front of Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi looked at the two of them and found that there were more or less injuries on their bodies. It seemed that the journey had not been smooth. The reason why he appeared to meet up with them was naturally because of Di Chuan's strength. Di Chuan's cultivation was originally at the 9th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Adding on the fact that he had a Tier 6 spiritual weapon in hand, his strength could definitely rank in the top 10 among all the participants of the elite meeting. Ling Shiqi naturally could not let go of such a person. Moreover, they had already made a deal before entering the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. As for Bu Yangqiu, although his cultivation had decreased and his battle strength was not much, he was still useful. For example, he could travel through the mines. However, just as they met, before they could say more, a huge explosion suddenly came over. This explosion was so loud that it even stirred up the gray fog in the sky and caused the earth to fiercely shake a few times. What's going on? This was the thought that appeared in the minds of Ling Shiqi and the others at the same time. Such a huge commotion definitely meant that something had happened. They had to go and take a look. The three of them looked at each other and then tacitly ran in the direction of the explosion. However, in this chaotic area, whether it was vision or perception, it was greatly suppressed. Moreover, there could be hidden monsters everywhere, so their speed was not fast. After about an hour, they finally arrived near the source of the explosion. When they saw the scene here, they all revealed shocked expressions. What they saw was a staircase that connected the heavens and the earth. This staircase was entirely gray-brown and looked very broken. Each staircase was abnormally wide and was the size of a small square. Its starting point was a sticky black pool. The staircase intertwined upwards and in some places, it even stood in the air and went straight into the clouds. So much so that no one knew what was at the end of the staircase. Ling Shiqi carefully sized up this strange staircase. He quietly opened his supercilious eyes and then felt many auras on the staircase. Those were the auras of monsters. This also meant that there were actually many monsters hidden up there. If they rashly went up, they would definitely not have a good ending. Then, he looked around and found that there were already a few people coming over. Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha, who he had fought with before, were all present. They were not alone. There were two people standing beside Wu Diao, both of whom were at the late stage of the spirit aperture realm. Zhuge Puha was a bit pitiful. He only had one helper, a graceful woman. No one said anything and just silently observed. Just like that, more than 2 hours passed, and no one else came here. This also meant that it was very likely that only the 8 of them were still alive. When they came in, there were 18 of them. Every one of them could be said to be a genius among geniuses. In the future, they could all become powerful experts, but now, 10 of them had already fallen. In fact, there were quite a few that died at the hands of Ling Shiqi. What surprised him was that Dongfang Qi had also fallen. Dongfang Qi was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. After destroying the Extreme Fire Manor, he had also received a lot of resources. He definitely had some life-saving items in his hands, but he still died here. Of course, what worried Ling Shiqi the most was Delta Origi. At this moment, Delta Origi still had not appeared. Could she have died as well? Although Delta Origi's cultivation was not high, she had always been cautious. Who knew how many trump cards she had hidden? If she died just like that, Ling Shiqi would definitely not believe it. But if she didn't die, why didn't she come here? Could it be that she was injured, or trapped by something? Ling Shiqi's brows were tightly knitted together, and he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. But at this moment, Bu Yangqiu suddenly shouted, "There's a figure on the staircase." Chapter 469. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi suddenly looked up. Sure enough, he saw a blurry figure suddenly appear on a flight of stairs dozens of feet high. Ling Shiqi's eyes narrowed. No, it wasn't just one, but a group. From afar, there seemed to be a large group of strange figures struggling and roaring. The strange thing was that Ling Shiqi didn't notice these figures when he first came here. Why was that? When the others saw those figures, they all frowned. Obviously, those strange figures were definitely not good people. Then, what should they do next? Should they climb the stairs to the sky and try to break through or continue to wait and see? Back then, Lei Mayan had said that this small 5 elements chaos paradise could only last for 7 days at most. Now, more than half of the time had passed. He just didn't know if they would be teleported out when the time was up, or if they would be locked in here forever. Ling Shiqi felt that it was more likely to be the latter. Everyone was serious about this test. If they didn't choose to climb the stairs in the end, perhaps no one would pass the test. However, Ling Shiqi didn't want to be a guinea pig. It would be best if someone could go up first and see what dangers were inside. Not only Ling Shiqi, but Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha also had the same idea. The 3 of them exchanged glances in the air and understood each other's intentions. Wu Diao immediately turned around and discussed with the other 2. Zhuge Puha also said something to the woman next to him. The woman suddenly showed a bitter expression. At this time, Bu Yangqiu, who was next to Ling Shiqi, took the initiative to stand up and said, "Brother Lu, let me go and check the situation first." Bu Yangqiu was very self-aware. He knew that the reason why Di Chuan and Ling Shiqi brought him was not because they had any feelings for him, but because they wanted him to take the risk. He was very clear in his heart, so he also knew that he had to stand up at this time. Rather than being forcefully thrown down the stairs, it would be better to take the initiative and save some face for himself. Ling Shiqi looked at Bu Yangqiu with praise and then nodded, "Be careful." Not long after, the 3 of them surged with spirit energy and arrived at the beginning of the stairs. Aside from Bu Yangqiu, there was a middle-aged man named Wang Zhu and a woman named Shi Feiying. Among them, Shi Feiying's cultivation was the highest at the 8th layer of the Spirit Aperture realm. Wang Zhu was second at the 7th layer. Only Bu Yangqiu's cultivation was the lowest, only at the initial stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. Therefore, Shi Feiying and Wang Zhu both stood half a body behind Bu Yangqiu. This was not because they respected him, but because they wanted Bu Yangqiu to go up first. Bu Yangqiu felt bitter, but he didn't have any other choice. Who told him to be the weakest here? The weak was a bandit, it was that simple. Noticing Bu Yangqiu's expression, Ling Shiqi didn't need to think too much to know that the gravity had definitely increased. If the gravity on the stairway to heaven was as strong as the Earth region, then it would be troublesome. One had to know that there were still countless monsters hidden in this stairway. However, Bu Yangqiu and the other two had just entered the stairway, so those monsters hadn't appeared yet. Under such a strong gravity, how could they fight against the monsters? Ling Shiqi raised his head to look at the stairway that pierced through the clouds. He didn't think that this stairway would only have gravity as an obstacle. There must be other mechanisms in place. Smoothly climbing the stairway to heaven wasn't an easy task. As Bu Yangqiu and the other two continued to move forward, everyone's gaze was also fixed on them. When the three of them reached the 11th step, a sudden change occurred. The first to bear the brunt was still Bu Yangqiu. When he stepped onto the 11th step, he immediately felt that the gravity had increased by a large amount. What was even more terrifying was that two clouds of gray smoke suddenly appeared, and two irregular-shaped monsters emerged from within. These two monsters looked like two clouds that had been pinched. They didn't have hands or feet, and only had a ferocious huge mouth. They opened their mouths and bit towards Bu Yangqiu and the other two. As long as he reached that place, he would definitely know who it was. With a thought, Ling Shiqi put on the demonic beast blood rune armor and used the ghostly spring steps. He arrived at the beginning of the stairway to heaven like a ghost. At this moment, he hesitated for a moment. He quickly looked around, but he still didn't see the figure in his heart. In the end, he looked at the ghostly shadows with a hint of hope in his eyes. Finally, he stepped onto the first step. After stepping onto the stairway, he felt the gravity on his body suddenly become twice as strong. However, this degree of gravity was not enough to affect him. He adapted for a moment and continued to walk forward. As he stepped onto the stairway to heaven, the gravity also slowly became stronger. When he reached the 11th step where Bu Yangqiu was, the gravity was already 5 times stronger. The remaining 8 people gathered on the 11th step. Fortunately, the stairway to heaven was very wide, so it wasn't too crowded with all of them standing there. Among the 8 people, Wu Diao was the most relaxed. He cultivated an earth element cultivation method, which was of the same origin as the gravity space. The pressure on him was the least. In other words, Wu Diao could be said to have a certain advantage at this moment. Therefore, his threat was also increased by a lot. The 8 people gathered and naturally divided into 3 groups. Next, Wu Diao took the lead and stepped onto the 12th step. At this moment, 2 unknown monsters appeared on the stairway at the same time. In terms of aura, they were stronger than before. Wu Diao's expression didn't change. He casually waved his hand and a yellow light rippled out. The 2 monsters were twisted and shattered. It was the first time Ling Shiqi saw Wu Diao in action, so he couldn't help but take a few more glances. What Wu Diao used didn't seem to be an ordinary spiritual skill, nor did it seem like a spiritual skill. It was similar to the hand of the earth that he used before. It was some kind of secret technique. As the monsters died, they dropped 2 soul stones. Wu Diao naturally put them away. Next, Zhuge Puha stepped onto the 13th step. The scene here was almost the same as before. Ling Shiqi stepped onto the 14th step and also casually killed 2 monsters. The 3 of them didn't have much communication. They just took turns to walk up the stairway and kill monsters to obtain soul stones. To be able to reach this step, none of them were fools. On the contrary, each one of them was more shrewd than the other. They all knew that it would be the stupidest thing to do at this moment. Like the current method, there would be someone to test the next step for you and also take turns to obtain soul stones. Why not? Just like that, the 8 of them quickly walked up to the 21st step. When they reached here, the gravity clearly increased again. It was almost 8 times stronger. Bu Yangqiu's face was already a bit pale. What was even more troublesome was that the monsters that appeared changed from 2 to 3. Furthermore, the strength of the monsters that appeared now also increased. They were already comparable to Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators at the 2nd or 3rd level. Everyone's heart sank. It was already so difficult at the 20th step. What kind of terrifying danger would there be later? However, they definitely wouldn't retreat. Right now, they already had no way out. They could only continue to charge forward. The good thing was that the current level of danger was still within their acceptable range. It was just that their speed of advancement had decreased. As time passed, everyone walked higher and higher. The monsters they encountered also became stronger and stronger. The gravity on their bodies also became stronger and stronger. About an hour later, they finally arrived at the place filled with ghostly shadows. And this place was the 51st step. The moment everyone stepped onto the stairway, Bu Yangqiu's body paused and he almost fell to the ground. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.